Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when warmth wasn't something you could just flip on with a thermostat. Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a stone room, somewhere in a medieval town. The wind whistles through the window shutters, the floor beneath your feet is so cold it feels alive, and the walls seem to radiate chill like an open fridge. Your breath puffs visibly in the air, and the only thing separating you from the outside frost is a poorly fitted wooden door with a generous crack under it. You reach for a fire, but there isn't one. Not yet. Fires weren't always an all-night luxury. Wood costs money. Someone has to gather it. And if you're poor, chances are you're not burning anything tonight except maybe a scrap of old kindling or a dried-out animal dropping if you're lucky. So you do what everyone else did. You learn to get creative. Tonight's adventure, we're diving into the weirdest, strangest, and sometimes surprisingly clever ways that people in Europe stayed warm long before central heating, or even chimneys, became common. And fair warning, some of these tricks are charming, some are deeply uncomfortable, a few are borderline horrifying. You won't believe this, but at one point people were so desperate to stay warm, they actually snuggled up to heated bricks soaked in pig fat under their sheets. All right, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there right now? Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You pull a rough woolen blanket over your shoulders and start to explore. The first thing you notice is the ritual of staying warm isn't just about temperature. It's about survival, comfort, and even pride. In this cold, people developed whole systems of preparation, from how they layered clothing to how they placed their bed near the hearth. And when that failed, they turned to superstition, or simply huddled together in silence. A woman passes you in the corridor, her face half covered in linen, not because of modesty, because the wind bites, even indoors. She nods to you and scurries down the stone hall, her shoes slapping against the frozen floor like cracked leather fans. You follow her into the room where the family eats and sleeps. It smells like smoke, boiled cabbage, and something vaguely sour. That scent, it's the bedding. It hasn't been cleaned since last spring. Someone gestures to the bed, a lumpy pile of fabric with at least 4 bodies already nestled inside. No one blinks. Shared beds were normal, not just for family but even for strangers in inns. The warmth of another body was a literal lifesaver. If you were alone in bed, you were either a noble or a corpse. You hesitate, but the cold gnaws at your spine like a patient rat. You climb in, the blanket is scratchy. The person next to you mutters in a dialect you don't understand. You feel something furry at your feet. A dog. Maybe. You decide not to look. Across the room, a child sneaks out from under the blanket and pours something into a squat ceramic bottle. Boiled water. It's sealed with a cork and passed from person to person to warm the bed. Someone hisses as it brushes their skin. It's not made for comfort. It's made to not freeze. Suddenly, you realize how completely different life was when warmth had to be earned. And you're only just getting started. The first night in this cold, strange room changes something in you. Not just your core temperature, it shifts your entire idea of what it means to live through winter. You lie there, teeth chattering despite 4 layers of fabric and 2 other people pressed against you, and begin to understand that staying warm in the past wasn't a luxury. It was a strategy, a daily war, a negotiation with nature itself. There's a sound, faint, metallic. Someone setting a brazier in the corner. It's a shallow metal pan filled with glowing embers. Not a fire exactly, more like a smoulder. You sit up and watch as the eldest in the room, wrapped like a roll of old carpets, places a kettle inside the brazier. The air around it hisses, a shimmer of heat dancing in the smoky air. You edge toward it instinctively, even though the smoke clings to the roof beams and your lungs already itch. Comfort and danger go hand in hand here. The room is filled with objects that don't quite make sense until you're cold. A wooden pole with ragged clothes drying above the brazier. A thick curtain dividing the bed from the kitchen corner. Woven not for modesty, but to trap heat. Even the dog curled up at your feet has a purpose. Not a pet. A warmer. Someone passes you a mug. You sniff it cautiously. It's ale. Warm. Slightly sour. Flavoured with herbs. Hot drinks were everything. Tea hadn't even arrived yet in most parts of Europe, but hot ale, mulled wine, and even warmed goat's milk with spices were part of nightly routines. Not for taste, for heat. You notice, too, that people don't change clothes much. A man rolls over, his tunic riding up to reveal a second tunic beneath it, layers sewn together, and if he's like most, he probably hasn't removed that underlayer in weeks. In some regions, especially in the far north, people were stitched into their winter clothes in November and only cut free come April. It sounds ridiculous until you've tried to undress in a room this cold. The air slaps your skin like punishment. Later, someone mentions the hay beds. You'll see them soon. Straw-filled mattresses stuffed into sacks. But even now, you begin to appreciate every odd trick, every little adaptation. How people used fur scraps around their wrists and neck. How floors were sometimes covered in rushes not just for comfort but as insulation. How ceilings were deliberately low to trap heat around sleepers' heads. You notice one more thing. No one complains. No one moans about the temperature or shouts for more logs. They accept the cold like they accept the night, as something ancient, as something permanent. A small girl wraps her feet in wool rags and climbs into the corner near the warmest spot by the brazier. She offers you one of the rags. You shake your head. You're not that cold, yet, but you will be. And before long, you'll be just like them, hoarding warmth like treasure, listening to the floor groan with the wind, and whispering stories into the night to forget how cold your fingers are. Tomorrow you'll learn why underwear was considered a weapon against winter, and why it was sometimes better not to wear any at all. You wake slowly, unsure if it's morning or just a lighter shade of dark. The bed smells like wool, smoke, and sweat, and your limbs feel like they've stiffened overnight into shapes only vaguely human. You stretch a little, and something crunches faintly under your back, probably straw, or a crumb, or something you'd rather not identify. Everyone around you is still bundled up tight, barely moving under layers of threadbare cloth, and now it's time to face the day. But before you can do anything else, before even thinking about breakfast or chores, you need to consider one critical question. What are you going to wear underneath it all? Because here's the thing, no one really talks about when they imagine life in the past. Underwear wasn't just about modesty, it was insulation. And it was often weird. You slip out of bed and feel the air bite at your skin like an annoyed cat. A man near the hearth is already pulling on what looks like a long white tunic, linen, finely wrinkled, yellowed at the collar. That's his underlayer, called a chemise or shift, depending on the region. And everyone wears one, men, women, even children. Because it's that layer, not the flashy wool overcoat or the leather jerkin, that keeps your body heat close and the chill at bay. You reach for your own, rough linen, slightly damp from yesterday's sweat. But it's clean enough. It'll do. The beauty of linen is that it wicks moisture. The downside, when it's cold, it clings to you like a wet leaf. But you tug it over your head anyway, because without it, any outer layer you wear would get dirty fast. And washing wool? That's a whole ordeal. Best avoided unless you want your clothes to shrink 3 sizes. Next come the brays. Baggy linen underpants tied with a cord at the waist. They look a bit like wrinkled diapers, and feel about as dignified. but they're practical. They're your last line of defence against both frostbite and splinters if you sit down too fast on a wooden bench. And for women, no pants. Instead, they wear a long chemise, sometimes doubled up with a petticoat, and let the air do what it will beneath. Over the legs, you slide on woolen hose, long tubes of thick, scratchy fabric held up by points or ties. These aren't socks. They're more like leggings, but without elasticity or mercy. You spend several minutes fumbling with knots just to keep them from drooping to your ankles before lunch. And on some mornings, like this one, you might cheat and wrap strips of cloth around your shins and feet instead, or slip your toes into shoes already lined with straw. You've heard tales of people sewing hay into their stockings for extra padding, though it makes your legs itch just thinking about it. You glance around the room, everyone is layering. One man is sewing a tear in his undershirt. He's been wearing the same set since All Saints' Day. Another woman is darning socks she'll put over her hose for double warmth. Someone near the back is rubbing warm lard on the insides of his sleeves, swearing it helps trap heat. You try not to think too hard about that one. You finally pull on your tunic and belt, already sweating under your arms despite the icy air. But that's part of the plan. Sweat now, stay warm longer. No one strips off clothing just because they feel toasty. Once you're dressed, that's it. You're sealed in for the day, like a pastry in too many layers of dough. And if you think all this sounds uncomfortable, wait until you learn what happens when you don't take any of it off for months. You step outside into the grey dawn, bundled like a cabbage. Your arms barely bend, your legs rustle when you walk, and your underarms are already damp. But none of that matters, because the wind is howling, and you're not cold. Not yet. A neighbour passes by, and you notice something odd. His sleeves don't quite match. The wool on his right arm is newer, thicker, even dyed. The left? Patchy, thin, with what looks like a faint singe mark near the cuff. He catches your glance and shrugs. Lost the other in the hearth last winter, he mutters. This one's a curtain. And just like that, you understand. People didn't waste. A spare sleeve might be from a dead uncle's overcoat. A tunic might be pieced together from 3 others. A shift might have been passed down through 2 older sisters and a cousin before it ever reached you. In this world, layering isn't fashion. It's survival stitching. You glance down at your own hem. It's uneven. The fabric at the bottom is heavier than the rest. A strip of old cloak sewn on last month when your tunic got too short. The needlework isn't neat, but it holds. And best of all, it adds weight, which means more warmth where it matters. You shuffle along the packed dirt road, watching others make similar adjustments. A woman is stuffing straw into the tops of her boots. 2 boys share a single wool cloak, tied around both their necks like a saddle. An old man walks with a hunch, not from age, but from the extra shirt he's stuffed beneath his jerkin, probably padded with rags or crumpled linen to create air pockets. That sacred insulation layer everyone craves. At the edge of the square, a young apprentice tugs at the neckline of his doublet and winces. You ask him why. Sewn in, he mutters. All of it. From here, he points at his collar, to here. He gestures vaguely at his knees. Sewn in. You stare, horrified and a little impressed. He wasn't kidding. In some towns, especially in the far reaches of Eastern or Northern Europe, people were literally sewn into their winter underclothes, with thick thread. Starting in late autumn, they closed themselves in like hibernating animals, only cutting the stitching open again in spring. No need to dress and undress every day. No need to let the cold touch your skin at all. There were drawbacks, of course. Lice, odour, the sheer discomfort of wool fused to your very sense of identity. But it worked. It worked. And it wasn't just the peasants. Some accounts suggest even minor nobility adopted the practice when winter was harsh enough. A noble woman might be dressed in layers of chemises, petticoats and stays, all stitched at the seams. Undressing wasn't just impractical, it was dangerous. Of course, there were exceptions. Monks in certain regions practiced daily cold baths for spiritual discipline, and some walked barefoot in the snow, believing the pain brought them closer to God. You don't envy them, you barely believe them. Back in your borrowed room, you peel off your outer tunic and sit by the brazier. Underneath it all, you're still swaddled in linen and wool, and you're grateful. Not comfortable, but grateful. Because the lesson is clear. In the past, warmth wasn't about comfort. It was about persistence, endurance, and cleverness. And as the wind scratches against the shutters again, you realise it's going to get weirder from here. You don't sleep alone tonight, not because you're scared, but because the bed already has 3 people in it. That's just how it works. There's no shame in it. You've already learned that in this icy corner of the world, warmth is communal. The bed you crawl into is wide and shallow, more of a glorified wooden box than a mattress. It creaks when you settle in, and the sheets, if you can call them that, are coarse wool blankets with mysterious stains and the unmistakable scent of onion, smoke, and someone else's breath. To your left, a child snores softly. To your right, an older woman mumbles in her sleep. At your feet, something shifts under the blanket. You stiffen, but then it snorts. A dog. Of course. You'd heard about it earlier, but now you feel the truth. Even animals were part of the nighttime heating system. The dog sighs and presses its back against your toes, a surprisingly effective heater. But the real surprise comes when a hand passes you a warm, heavy object. You fumble it under the blanket. A bottle, ceramic, stoppered, still radiating heat. One of the older men filled it from the kettle and slid it in minutes before. You clutch it close to your chest, grateful beyond words. It's not just about being warm. It's about not crying from the cold. These are bed warmers, sometimes called stone pigs or bed bottles. They're filled with hot water, ashes, or even baked stones. In wealthier homes, they're sleek and painted. In humbler places, they're crude clay bottles that often leak a bit. But either way, they're your best friend now. The difference between frostbite and a bearable night's sleep. In the dark, someone mutters, "Careful, it cracked last week." You instantly shift the bottle away from your stomach, and if you're in a particularly poor region, you might not have a ceramic bottle at all. Instead, someone hands you a hot potato. Yes, an actual roasted potato wrapped in cloth. You press it to your belly and realise it works just as well. In the morning, they'll eat it cold for breakfast, but sometimes bed warmers didn't go under the blanket. They were the blanket. Heavy bricks, wrapped in linen or wool, heated in the fire, then laid directly on the bed frame, or flat metal pans filled with glowing coals, slid between the sheets just long enough to chase away the damp. But you had to be quick. One careless moment, and the ember pan left more than warmth. It left holes. You hear a grunt from the other side of the bed. Someone's foot touches yours. You flinch. But then you remember. Body heat is more precious than pride. There are stories of travellers in cold regions being offered a spot in a communal bed with total strangers, just to survive the night. At the inn down the road, the keeper might whisper, "Sleep tight, don't mind the snoring." You'd pay less if you agreed to share the bed with 2 other guests. And so you lie still, breathing slowly, your back pressed to the curved spine of someone you've never met. The fire in the hearth has burned low. The stone bottle is cooling. But inside this tangle of limbs and fabric, you find a strange comfort. A human warmth that predates electricity, that doesn't rely on money or status. It's not romantic, it's not even hygienic, but it's deeply human. And tonight, it keeps you alive. The sky outside is ink dark, though dawn isn't far. No one stirs yet, but you're awake, wide awake, cradling the warm bottle like a sacred relic. The dog is snoring now, one ear twitching every so often. Your fellow bedmates shift and mumble in their dreams. You listen to the wood groan softly above and feel the chill trying to creep back in at your exposed neck. And then you hear it, a sound from the floorboards below, faint clinks and a soft whoosh of steam. Someone's already up, feeding the coals in the hearth. You sit up, careful not to disturb the others, and tiptoe over, the boards cold against your feet despite the layers of straw. By the fireplace, a woman crouches with a poker and a practiced rhythm. The fire is barely a whisper, just glowing red at its core. She adds a fresh log, and then, next to the firebox, reaches for a metal pan shaped like a shallow dish with a long wooden handle. She cracks it open. Inside, still hot ashes from the night before. You recognise it now. A bed warmer pan. This one's battered from use, the brass dulled, the wood handle blackened where it's been too close to flame too many times. She sprinkles in new coals, seals the lid, and swings the pan gently like a pendulum. It's almost graceful, soothing even. After a minute, she places it near her feet, warming her toes as she works. Later that same pan will be slid between someone's sheets, not to stay there, just long enough to drive out the worst of the damp and the cold. But you have to be fast and careful. You've already heard the story about a man 2 streets over who fell asleep with the pan still under the covers. The mattress caught fire. He lived, barely, but the bed didn't. There's a reason the richer homes use stoneware instead. Less risk of an inferno. You step closer, and she offers you a lump of something wrapped in cloth. You unwrap it. A heated brick, charred at the edges, still warm to the touch. She nods at the hearth. Fire's stingy this morning. That'll have to do. You take it and press it to your stomach through your tunic. Bliss. For a few minutes anyway. She smiles and points toward the stairs. Better get it under the blankets. Once it cools, it's just a rock. And that's the brutal truth. Everything in this world, every tool, trick or habit, is designed to preserve just a sliver of warmth for just a little longer. Because once it's gone, and the cold waits, always waits. You return to bed, slipping the brick in near your feet. The warmth is already fading. The child beside you opens one eye and murmurs. You get the last one? You nod. She sighs and rolls over. No jealousy, just resignation. Tomorrow, it'll be her turn. Or not. You're starting to see how things work here. Heat is passed, traded, bartered. Who gets the warmer bed? Who gets the freshest embers? Who's old enough to sleep closest to the fire? The rules are soft, but everyone follows them. And before you drift off again, you realise this isn't just about warmth. It's about community, about small mercies in cold places, about trusting the people you sleep beside. You tuck the stone closer, the dog sighs, and the fire pops once in the distance. Sleep finds you again, in a bed full of strangers. Strangers who, for one night, might as well be family. You wake before sunrise, not because of an alarm, but because your bladder is demanding attention. And now you're faced with a dilemma older than central heating. Leave the warm bed and risk freezing, or hold it and hope your kidneys forgive you. You sigh. The choice is made. You shuffle upright, carefully extracting yourself from the bed without waking the others. Your feet hit the icy floorboards, and you hiss through your teeth. The dog grumbles. Somewhere in the darkness, someone coughs. You reach beneath the bed frame. Your fingers search blindly, brushing past straw and dust before landing on a familiar object. Smooth, round, cold. You lift it out carefully. It's a chamber pot, and in this world, it's a necessity. There's nothing glamorous about it. It's just a ceramic or tin vessel, usually stained from use and chipped at the rim. But when the alternative is walking through a frost-covered hallway to an outhouse, or worse, squatting in the woods at midnight, it's a lifesaver. You do what you must, then slide the pot back into its hiding place, far from the blankets. It's not just you. Everyone in this house has one. You spotted 4 under different beds last night, each one looking slightly more dangerous than the last. Some are covered, some not. The air carries a faint tang of urine and ashes, but no one mentions it. You all pretend it isn't there. And then comes the second stage of your morning ritual, warming your feet. You tiptoe across the frigid room, past the dying embers of the hearth, to a wooden stool that looks more like a box. You lift the lid. Inside, glowing charcoal nestles in a shallow tray, lined with sand. You slide your feet inside the opening. This is a foot stove, a deceptively simple contraption that's more ingenious than it appears. It's just a wooden box with slats, vent holes, and a little tray for embers. But it works like magic. You wiggle your toes inside, sighing as feeling begins to return to your limbs. These foot warmers weren't just for home use either. People took them everywhere. To church, tucked under long dresses, to the market hidden beneath carts. Some were built into benches, others had handles and latches for carrying like a purse. If you were lucky, yours had a bit of brass lining to hold the heat longer. If not, you hoped the wood didn't scorch your socks. In some households there was only one foot stove to share. The elders used it first. Children took turns, and on especially brutal days you'd see folks fighting over it. Quietly, politely, but with unmistakable desperation. You remember someone telling you once about a woman who burned a hole through all 3 pairs of her wool socks because she fell asleep with her feet resting directly on the embers. She was lucky it wasn't her toes. You glance around the room. A young boy is pulling on his boots, eyes still half closed. A girl is holding her hands above the coals, whispering something under her breath, probably praying the fire doesn't go out before breakfast. There's no room here for waste. The heat from every ember is rationed like sugar during wartime. You learn to capture warmth like water in your palms, fleeting, precious, always slipping away too soon. And as you lift your feet from the box and wiggle your stiff toes back into their straw-lined shoes, you start to understand the rhythm of survival. Sleep, warm, eat, work, repeat. But warmth wasn't just kept at your feet. Sometimes it wrapped around your shoulders and head, even indoors. You settle back onto the edge of the bed, your feet tingling from the foot stove's fading glow. The room is beginning to stir. Someone sneezes. A kettle clanks into place over the hearth. A chair scrapes. You reach for your outer cloak not to go outside, but because the room is still cold enough to see your breath. That's when you notice something else strange. Everyone is putting on cloaks, capes or hoods, even though the sun's barely up and no one's leaving the house. It feels theatrical at first, like you've stepped into a poorly rehearsed play about medieval survival. But then you see the logic. Indoors in winter isn't indoor the way you know it. The wind slips through the wall planks. Stone leaks chill like a sponge leaks water. A hood isn't fashion, it's insulation. You sling a thick wool cloak over your shoulders, the coarse fabric scratching at your neck, and pull the heavy hood over your head. At once the world becomes quieter, tighter, warmer. It's like wearing a personal tent. The edges trap your body heat. Your breath bounces back against your cheeks, and for the first time since waking up, you stop shivering. Across from you, a young woman tightens a padded scarf around her chin. It's tied like a bonnet tucked beneath her ears. Beside her, a man wears a kind of shoulder cape that drapes just below his ribs, short enough not to interfere with his arms, thick enough to block the worst of the drafts. He wears it indoors and out. It probably hasn't been washed since the last snowfall. And then someone walks in wearing what looks like a bag on their head. You blink. It is a bag. Sort of. It's called a nightcap or head bag, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A thick linen or wool cap that ties under the chin. People wore them to bed, under cloaks, even under hats. A well-insulated head was the secret to conserving body heat. There's an old saying whispered in some cold regions: if your head is warm, your heart won't die. In fact, some took it further. In extreme cases, people slept with entire wraps around their heads, covering nose, ears, and mouth. You wonder how they breathed. You wonder how they slept. But you also realise you're starting to want one. There's a woman near the window who wears fingerless gloves and a hood indoors. She stirs a pot with one hand while holding her cloak shut with the other. When she turns, you see the outline of straw tucked into the hem. She's added stuffing to her clothes like insulation in a wall. Not elegant, but it works. Someone offers you a drink, warm ale or weak broth, and you wrap your cloak tighter as you sip. Even the heat from the cup helps. You press your nose to the steam and let it fog your lashes. Around the room you see no exposed skin. Not on adults, not on children. The idea of airing out is ludicrous here. Heat is hoarded, stored, woven into layers. Sometimes you even see people wearing cloaks to bed, doubled with a blanket on top. You did it last night without thinking, but now you understand. It's part of the routine. And while it looks absurd, a room full of people dressed like travelling monks, it's oddly beautiful. Cloaks lined in fur, scarves patched from rags, bonnets embroidered by candlelight. These aren't costumes, they're armour, against winter, against death. You run your fingers along the wool edge of your hood and pull it lower. Your ears finally feel warm. The sun has risen, though you wouldn't know it by the light. A weak pale glow filters through the shutter slats, landing in dusty lines across the stone floor. You take a deep breath, steeling yourself for what comes next. It's time to leave the relative shelter of the bedroom and venture into the hallway. It's colder out here. Much colder. The warmth of shared bodies and fire doesn't travel far in houses like this. And what hits you first is the draft. A slow, ghostly finger tracing its way down your back. You pull your cloak tighter and instinctively press yourself to the centre of the hall, away from the walls. Because here's something you've just remembered. You never sleep against the outer wall. Everyone in the house knows this rule, though no one ever says it aloud. You just feel it. The stone is damp to the touch. If you lean on it too long, it pulls the heat right out of your skin. On the coldest nights, water vapour crystallizes against it, and your blanket might freeze to the wall if it brushes the surface, so beds are pushed to the middle of rooms, or, in poorer homes, moved nightly toward the fire. And the floor? Don't get romantic. You're not lying on furs like in the storybooks. If you're lucky, there's a raised wooden platform to lift your body off the icy ground. If not, it's straw, just straw, packed into linen sacks or tossed loosely into corners. You pass a small alcove and pause. A girl is making her bed for the day, but instead of fluffing pillows or folding sheets, she's turning hay, literally. She grabs fistfuls of it and tosses it around to even out the lumps. Then she pulls a worn wool blanket over the mess, pats it flat and nods. Done. That's her sleeping spot. You remember hearing about this, the haybed or pallet. It sounds simple, even quaint, until you realise what it feels like. Straw pokes through the thin sackcloth, itches your skin, rustles whenever you move, and worst of all, it harbours guests, mice, lice, even fleas. People try their best, air the hay, burn herbs nearby, shake out the bedding. But by midwinter, most have made peace with the scratching. Still, straw has its strengths. It insulates, it breathes, and best of all, it's cheap. For most people in Europe before the 19th century, it was the only mattress they ever knew. Some families even laid out piles of dried leaves or moss when straw was scarce. You glance at your sleeve, still speckled with hay dust from your own sleep. At the far end of the hall, a man is stuffing sheep's wool into the cracks between the window boards. "North wind's comin'," he mutters. "You'll feel it before supper." You believe him. Another woman nearby is pinning rags along the doorframe, trying to stop the draft that whistles underneath. These walls weren't built to seal in heat. Even noble homes, with their thick stone construction, have so many gaps that the wind weaves through them like thread through lace. That's when you see it. Tucked behind the door is a narrow bundle of old cloaks and linens, folded to form a wool bed. A desperate attempt to keep warm in a forgotten corner. Someone clearly slept there last night. The fabric is still indented from a curled body, probably the last to arrive, or the one no one wanted too close to the fire. You reach out, touch the wall behind it. It's ice. Your fingers pull back from the wall instinctively. The cold clings, not just a chill, but a deeper, biting numbness that seeps into the bones. You flex your knuckles, trying to chase it off, but it lingers, like the memory of something unpleasant. You look again at the folded bedding wedged into the corner, and you understand now. That spot is a punishment. Not official, of course, but everyone knows. The coldest spot in the room goes to the newest arrival, or the poorest, or the one who asked too many questions the night before. You leave the hall and head toward the kitchen, drawn by the scent of smoke and something cooking, if you can call it that. It's porridge, thin, watery, barely warm but enough to count as breakfast. People gather near the hearth, not because they're hungry yet, but because that corner is the warmest in the house. It's more than just the fire, it's the hearth wall, the one interior wall in any house that holds on to heat. You learn quickly to lean against it, to dry socks near it, to sleep as close as anyone will allow. The dog is already curled up there. A toddler is pressed against the bricks, steam rising from their hair. You join them, and in this quiet moment you observe something rarely mentioned in old books or stories. How people position themselves throughout the day. No one sits randomly. The old woman is always near the coals. The children gather close, not out of need, but because their parents put them there. Young adults drift near the walls, used to the cold, stronger against it. Everyone finds their place like birds on a wire, balancing body heat and social rules. That's when someone says it. Better to sleep on straw in the middle of the room than with your back to the wall. It's a saying in these parts. You nod. You get it now. Against the wall is where toes turn blue. At midday, someone offers to show you how they used to winter in the loft, above the animals. You blink, confused, until you realise the barn is warmer than the house, but that story will wait. Back here, people begin tidying up. The hay beds are fluffed, the wool blankets hung to air, though in this weather they'll dry slower than paint. And then someone lays out a quilted roll near the hearth, tucks in a few clay stones from the fire, and prepares a day resting spot for the old man who can't climb stairs. You move toward the edge of the room again, and that same draught finds you. The moment you step away from the hearth wall, it's as if something rips the warmth from your shoulders. It's that fast, that stark. You retreat just as quickly, back toward the embers, back to where heat still clings to the air like a memory. You glance up toward the rafters and notice bundles of dried herbs, lavender, sage, thyme, hanging in quiet clusters. Not just for cooking. People believe they keep away the damp, purify the air and lift the spirits. Maybe they do. At the very least, they offer a smell better than straw and sweat. Later you'll walk outside again, but you'll dread it. Because out there's no hay bed, no foot stove, no wall you can trust. But for now, You stand at the hearth, not touching it, just close enough to feel. And in this cold, brutal world, that's as good as gold. You follow a narrow path down behind the house, past the stacked firewood and the ash pit, to a small outbuilding that smells like hay, dung, and something oddly sweet. Warm breath. As the door creaks open, you step into a stable where animals shift in their stalls, rustling straw and stomping hooves against packed earth. At first, the smell makes your nose wrinkle, but then something unexpected happens. Warmth, not from fire, not from sunlight, but from the bodies of cows and goats, slowly exhaling their heat into the closed air around you. It's a living furnace. The boy beside you grins. Better than the hearth some nights. He's not wrong. As the animals breathe, as they chew and shift and twitch, the air in here becomes heavy with moisture and warmth. In harsh winters, families didn't just visit the barn. They moved in. You climb a creaking ladder to the loft above, a simple wooden platform layered in straw. There's no insulation, no real privacy. Just a low ceiling and a slope of hay bales to one side. But up here, directly over the animals, the rising heat collects and lingers. You sit down, feel the straw prickling your legs, and realise it's actually warmer than the house. In many parts of Europe, especially in the Alps and the northern stretches, this arrangement was common. Whole families would winter above their livestock, sharing not only a roof, but a heating system made of fur, breath, and manure. The heat from a few cows could keep the frost from settling on your bones, and the animals didn't seem to mind. As long as they were fed and watered, they lived their lives in peaceful warmth, and in return gave a little back. You lie down for a moment, listening to the low sounds below. A snort, a tail thump, the rhythmic chewing of cud, and above all the absence of that needle-sharp draught that haunts the stone walls of the main house. Some families even built deliberate two-level dwellings, with animals on the bottom and people on the top, designing their homes not around comfort, but around thermal logic. What would today seem unsanitary or strange was, for centuries, a simple equation. The cow is warm. I must be near the cow. You glance around the loft. There are blankets bundled in corners, scraps of cloth stuffed into wall cracks, and the unmistakable shape of a sleeping mat. Someone stayed here last night. Maybe by choice. Maybe because they were the youngest. Or maybe just because it was their turn. The boy points to a small stack of flat stones beside the hay bales. For your back, he explains, heated in the embers before bed. You wrap 'em in wool and tuck 'em behind your spine. You pick one up. It's smooth, blackened from years of fire, and still faintly warm from the previous night. He watches you for a moment, then says with a shrug, "It ain't a feather bed, but your nose won't freeze off." You believe him, and just when you think you've seen every rustic trick imaginable, he lifts a flap of cloth near the far corner and reveals something strange. A clay jug, half buried in straw, with steam rising from its neck. "It's for the hands," he says simply. You move closer. You crouch beside the jug, watching the thin line of steam slip through the neck like a ghost escaping. The boy lifts it carefully, it's warm to the touch, not scalding, and sets it between you on the straw. "We bury it before supper," he says. "By morning it still holds heat. Good for fingers." You wrap your hands around it slowly. The clay is smooth, damp near the base, and it radiates a gentle, pulsing warmth. Different from fire, less intense, but more enduring. This isn't just a trick for comfort. It's a small miracle. The boy explains. The jug was filled with boiled water and ash, then sealed and packed in straw overnight. The ash slows the cooling. Some even add salt or heated pebbles to stretch the warmth a few more hours. It's simple, ingenious, and like everything else here, born of necessity. You look around the loft again with new eyes. That pile of tattered wool in the corner, likely a makeshift wind block for someone's head while they slept. That cluster of flattened tins near the edge, heated, wrapped and tucked under armpits to keep the core warm. Everything here serves a purpose. Below, one of the cows snorts and shifts. The air thickens with warm breath, a low fog rising toward the rafters. The boy picks up a square of cloth and shows you how he ties it over his mouth and nose at night, not for modesty, but to trap exhaled warmth and protect his lungs from the freezing air. "If I breathe cold too long, I cough blood," he says matter-of-factly. And suddenly you remember something someone told you the day before. Cold air isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Breathing it too deeply, too often, was believed to rot your lungs, ruin your teeth, weaken your blood. Whether the science was right or not didn't matter. The experience confirmed the belief. Chill air hurt, warmth healed. Down below, someone enters the stable with a kettle refilling the animals' water. Even the livestock drink warm on days like this. A horse might refuse ice-cold water, or worse, fall ill from it. So fires are kept burning all day, not just for people, but for creatures too. It's a shared pact. We warm you, you warm us. The boy pulls out another jug from beneath the straw, this one cooler, and sets it by the ladder. It will be reheated later for evening use. Nothing is wasted. Heat isn't just precious, it's recycled. And as you watch the morning unfold, the daily rhythm falls into place. Boil, wrap, bury, warm, repeat. Not just survival, but ritual. The comfort of repetition. The quiet pride in knowing that warmth, however humble, was earned, not gifted. You lean back on your elbows, straw poking through your cloak. Overhead, the low ceiling presses down like a wool cap. Below, the animals breathe in, steady chorus. Around you, every surface glows with a faint memory of fire, body and breath. For a brief moment, you don't feel like a visitor. You feel like someone who belongs in this place, who understands, finally, the subtle, stubborn and deeply human ways people carved warmth from a cold world. And as the boy offers you another warm stone, already wrapped in cloth, you smile and take it without a word. The sun has climbed, but its warmth barely reaches the ground. Outside, frost still clings to the grass, and the breath of every villager drifts in steady puffs like smoke from a slow-burning pipe. You follow a narrow trail through the centre of town, led by a hunched old man with soot on his sleeves and burn marks on his boots. "Too windy to heat the room," he mutters, "so we carry the fire with us." You think he's joking until you see it. In his hands he holds a metal pan, shallow and blackened, its base glowing faintly red. Inside are live coals, sitting on a layer of ash. The pan swings gently from a hooked handle. With each step a few sparks flicker and die against the chilly air. It's mesmerizing and faintly alarming. You glance at the hem of his cloak, already singed in 2 places. This is a brazier, or in some regions, a chafing dish, and it's not for cooking. It's portable fire, a room heater, a survival tool. Poor families with no central hearth would heat a brazier in the morning and carry it from room to room. One fire to share among many people, many tasks. You follow him into a small cottage, dark and still inside. A woman coughs softly from the corner. A baby whimpers. He places the brazier on a wide tile near the centre of the room, and instantly the air begins to shift. Slowly, gently, as if the fire is exhaling. You step close. The warmth doesn't radiate far, but it's something. Just enough to keep the frost from settling on your eyelashes. Around the brazier, people begin to move. A child extends their hands. A mother pours water from a clay jug and sets it nearby, letting the fire's heat take the edge off the morning's ice. A grandfather unwraps a wool scarf, lays it across his knees, and smiles faintly as the chill in his bones retreats. And then someone closes the door. That's when it hits you. Within minutes, the air becomes heavy, not warm, thick. The smoke, faint but ever present, begins to gather. Not in billows, but in slow spirals, rising to the ceiling beams and lingering like fog in a low valley. There's no chimney here, just a few roof slats removed near the edge to let the worst of the smoke drift out. But on a day like this, windless and bitter, it barely escapes. Your throat begins to itch, your eyes sting, you cough, and the boy beside you nods sympathetically. "Can't open the window," he whispers. "Cold's worse than smoke." It's not just this cottage. In countless homes across Europe, this was the trade. Smoke for warmth. A brazier kept you alive, but it could also make you sick. The unlucky ones fainted from carbon monoxide. Others lived with constant headaches, sore throats, or lungs that rattled in the night. In some places they tried to fix it. Vent holes in the ceiling, slatted windows covered in oiled cloth, but often those were luxuries, and so people burned what they had: wood, peat, dried dung, even animal bones, and shared the space with the smoke like an unwelcome cousin who wouldn't leave. You wipe your eyes and step back. The warmth is still there, but now you understand its price. The air thickens by the minute. You shift to the far side of the room, where a slit of daylight sneaks in through warped wood. It's barely enough to see by, but it helps you breathe. The others don't move. They've grown used to it, the quiet trade-off between warmth and breath. One you now realise was made every winter day for centuries. Near the brazier, someone tosses in a few more embers. The pan hisses, a single spark leaping up like a firefly, before vanishing into the haze. The temperature rises just enough to thaw the water in a nearby basin. You touch the side, still cold, but not frozen. That's progress. A young man comes in through the rear door, arms full of kindling and something else, a basket of dried dung bricks. He sets them down with a grunt. "Wood's too dear," he says. "These hold longer anyway." He's not lying. Across many rural regions in medieval and early modern Europe, dried animal dung, pressed, stacked, aged, was a common fuel, especially in treeless areas, where even dead wood had to be rationed. You watch as he carefully places one into the brazier, using iron tongs. It blackens quickly, sending up a distinct sour, smoky scent that makes your nose wrinkle. No one complains. This is simply what warmth smells like. In a small alcove, two children huddle beside a ceramic tile propped on bricks. It's painted crudely with birds and vines, though the colours are faded by soot. Their mother explains that it was once part of a stove wall in a manor house long gone, salvaged, reused. The tile, when heated near the brazier, retains warmth for hours. The children press their hands to it and giggle at the warmth, not understanding yet how valuable a good piece of tile can be when the world is frozen. The old man with the burned cloak leans over and lifts the brazier with a thick cloth. "Time to take it to the next room," he mutters. And just like that, the heat source is on the move again, migrating from person to person like a shared secret. You follow him through the cottage to a side chamber. Low ceiling, no windows, a bed against the inner wall. A woman lies there, coughing softly under a mound of quilts. He places the brazier near her feet, then opens a small vent hole in the wall above, just barely enough to let the smoke rise. "Can't afford another fire," he says. "This one has to warm 3 rooms." In the far corner you spot a strange object, a long-handled shovel, blackened at the end. "That's for the stones," someone tells you. "Heat them in the coals, then carry them upstairs wrapped in wool." Another portable solution, but one that requires constant vigilance. A cracked stone explodes, a dropped one scorches skin, and always there's the danger of asphyxiation if the room is sealed too tight. You breathe carefully. The room smells like ash and burnt cloth, but it's livable, warmer than outside, warmer than some of the beds you've seen. The brazier flickers again, steady but modest. Not a flame to dance around, just a core. A coal heart beating slow and low, and you realise, for those who had no hearth of their own, warmth wasn't a fixed thing. It was borrowed, carried, passed, shared, and always fleeting. Later that afternoon, someone mentions the bathhouse. You raise an eyebrow. Bath? In this weather? But the others nod solemnly, and one woman gestures for you to follow. It's not for getting clean, she says. It's for getting warm. You trail behind her through the narrow alleys of the village, past shuttered windows and shuttered faces. Smoke rises from a small wooden structure set apart from the rest of the homes. A door creaks open, and a gust of steam hits you in the face like a blanket soaked in sweat and smoke. Inside, the room is dim and full of bodies, women to the left, men to the right, and in the centre a giant black cauldron sitting over an open fire, bubbling quietly like a witch's soup. The heat is overwhelming. After days in damp rooms and frozen halls, your skin can hardly understand what's happening. Pores open, your face flushes. You sit slowly on a wooden bench slick with moisture, the air heavy with the scent of boiled herbs, human sweat, and wet wood. This is no luxury spa. It's a communal steam bath, a tradition stretching across regions from Scandinavia to Eastern Europe. In Russia, it's called a banya. In Finland, a sauna. In other places, it's just the hot room. But everywhere the purpose is the same, to drive the cold out of the body, not just from the skin, but from the bones, the lungs, the blood. A woman ladles hot water onto the stones piled in the corner. Steam hisses upward, and the temperature jumps. A few people groan in satisfaction. One man clutches his chest dramatically, then laughs. The sweat starts quickly, beads forming along your arms, your back, the crease of your neck. For a moment you think you're in heaven. Then the rituals begin. Someone hands you a bundle of birch twigs tied at one end like a broom. For beating, they say. You frown. But they demonstrate. Light slaps along the back, the legs, the arms. It's called Venic in the East. It stimulates blood flow, opens the skin. You try it. It stings, then tingles, then feels good. You get the sense that it's part bath, part ritual, part endurance test. But even here, even in the warmest room you've entered in days, the shadow of the cold waits just outside the door. That's why the bathhouse isn't just for cleansing or sweating. It's for fortification. People believe that opening your pores to heat strengthens the body against winter, but only if done properly. Too much time inside and you'll collapse. Step outside too fast, and the cold will strike your lungs like a hammer. Some whisper tales of people who died right after leaving the bath, hit by cold like a curse. A boy throws open the door briefly, letting in a gust of freezing air. Someone yells at him. Another rushes to seal the gap. You sit quietly, stunned by how fragile the balance is. Heat's a game here. One wrong move, and the cold wins. You linger in the bathhouse long after your skin has turned pink and your hair clings wetly to your temples. Every breath feels deep and heavy, like you're drinking warmth instead of air. Around you, others are washing or just sitting in silence, letting the steam do the work. A man ladles more water onto the stones. The room hisses in response. Eventually someone nudges you. "Time to cool down," they whisper. You blink. Cool down? The idea sounds traitorous, but they're serious. A rhythm governs this place. Heat, then chill, then heat again. Without that balance, they say, your body softens too much, becomes weak. vulnerable to the cold outside. You follow them to a smaller chamber. It's dimly lit, with wooden benches and cool stones on the walls. Here, the steam thins. You sit. Your skin tingles, tightening in the new air. Someone offers a cloth soaked in vinegar to rub over your arms. It's supposed to seal the heat in and cleanse the pores. You don't argue. You're beyond questioning now. A young girl enters with a clay cup of warm broth, seasoned with garlic and something earthy. She hands it to an old woman, who sips slowly and hums with pleasure. "Warms the belly," she says. "Better than fire." The broth is made from root vegetables, herbs, and sometimes even onions boiled in milk, a local cure for everything from frostbite to heartbreak. You accept a cup and sip. It tastes strange, savoury, slightly sour, but it fills you with a slow burn that spreads from throat to stomach. Beside you, a man rubs onion slices into his socks, muttering about drawing cold out through the feet. You're not sure if it's science or superstition, but again, no one laughs. In winter, everything's worth trying. As you sit, wrapped in steam and stories, someone begins combing their hair with a bone comb near the coals. Another person smooths bear fat on their chapped hands. A third rubs warm poppy seed oil into their joints. These little comforts, half medicine, half magic, are passed down like heirlooms. No one questions them. The fire inside the bathhouse may be hot, but it's these rituals that keep people going. The woman beside you begins to braid her damp hair. She hums a lullaby, the kind passed from mother to daughter in rooms like this, with winter pressing at the walls. You catch a phrase or two. It's about frost spirits and sleeping cows, warmth beneath snow. You close your eyes, listening. And then the spell breaks. The door opens. You know it's time. Stepping outside is like diving into ice. The warmth you hoarded scatters in an instant. Your skin seizes. Your breath catches in your throat. You wrap your cloak tight, but it's not enough. Nothing is. The cold finds every crack, every seam. But strangely, you don't panic. You've been fortified. Your skin remembers the fire. Your blood still runs hot with broth and birch. Your pores, though screaming, know what this is now. The shock, the discipline, the dance. The others don't run. They walk, steady and practiced, back toward their homes, back to bed-warmed bricks and straw pallets and clay jugs tucked under blankets. You follow, every footstep crunching sharp in the snow. And you realize something strange. In a world this cold, you don't chase warmth. You carry it with you. You return home just before dusk, your skin still humming faintly from the bathhouse. The cold rushes to reclaim you, of course, slinking under your sleeves, nipping at your collar, but you hold it off with layers, with motion, with memory. Your fingers tingle, but they don't freeze. Your toes are stiff, but not numb. You've learned the rhythm now. The hearth fire is low. The brazier has gone cold. But you notice something new on the table. A steaming cup, faintly golden in colour, resting beside a cloth-wrapped bundle. You sit down, draw the cup to your lips, and inhale. It's ale. Hot ale, brewed weak and sweet, spiced with cloves, cinnamon, and a hint of rosemary. The taste is strange at first. Warm beer doesn't sound appealing, but the heat spreads through your chest, seeping down your ribs like a slow tide. You take another sip. It's working. A young woman across the table wraps her hands around her own mug. "We always make it this way," she says. "Keeps the lungs warm and the toes." She lifts one foot off the floor and wiggles it for emphasis. She's wrapped her feet in onion skins tied on with strips of linen. You blink. "Draws the frost out," she adds. You're not sure whether to laugh or try it, but that's the rule here. If it's warm, it's worth trying. A man shuffles in from the cold, clutching a cloth bundle. He unwraps it slowly, revealing a brick-sized loaf of bread still warm from the coals. He tears it in half and passes one to the table. Inside it's soft and steaming, baked with nuts and bits of dried fruit. The smell alone heats the room by a degree. You take a bite. It's dense and chewy, and somehow it warms more than just your stomach, as if the body recognizes that warmth taken in through food is somehow more trustworthy than fire or blanket. Another woman brings a pot of mulled wine from the hearth. Not for celebration, this isn't a feast, but because fermented drinks mixed with herbs and spices were known to stoke the blood. She pours it into earthen mugs, the steam curling like fingers. You hear the names of herbs whispered: anise, sage, hyssop, thyme. Some say they cleanse the breath. Others believe they heat the liver, but no one doubts their worth. The drinks are passed around without ceremony. Warmth, like stories, is shared in silence. You glance at the bundle on the table. It's a pair of cloth-wrapped stones pulled from the embers and tied in twine. Not for bed, for the lap. People here sit for hours in the evenings with heated stones on their thighs or against their bellies. It's a quiet way to conserve what little fire the house still holds. Someone offers you one. You place it on your lap, and the sensation is immediate, like holding the sun in your hands. Not blazing, but steady, reassuring. You imagine the stone in the morning, cool and grey, ready to be returned to the fire again. A cycle, nothing wasted. You sip your ale. The warmth spreads again, softer, this time, and as the room settles into its evening hush, you begin to see how every corner of this world has been shaped by a single desire: to pull the heat inward and not let it go. The room quiets as night thickens outside. No one speaks much after supper. Words slow with the cold. Movements become small, deliberate, meant to conserve heat, not waste it on unnecessary bustle. You sit with the warmed stone resting in your lap, a cup of mulled wine cooling in your hands, and observe the quiet rituals of a world sculpted around holding warmth like a breath. Near the hearth, a young mother pulls her child onto her lap, wrapping both of them in a single wool shawl. They rock together slowly, the motion less for comfort and more to share body heat. Her face is calm, but her fingers never stop moving, rubbing the child's arms through the fabric, then pressing her own cheek to the girl's forehead to gauge the balance between warmth and chill. In the corner, someone is stitching, not mending a tear but sewing warm herbs into a pouch, dried marjoram and thyme mixed with mustard seeds. The cloth will be warmed on the hearth and laid on aching joints or across the chest of anyone who starts to cough. It heats the air inside the lungs, the old woman says, not looking up. Makes the cold forget you're there. On the floor, a pair of boys huddle near the brazier, roasting the last of the apples, not for taste but for heat. The fruit hisses and splits. They press their hands over the steam, then pass the apples around, each taking a bite and holding it in their mouth for a moment like a coal, warming their cheeks and tongue. Someone sneezes near the door, and a woman stands to pour a ladle of onion broth, left over from the root cellar. She stirs in a splash of beer and hands it over without a word. It's thick, yellow, and smells sharp, but the man drinks it with a quiet thanks. Better than snow in your lungs, someone mutters. You glance around and realise that every act here has a second purpose. Every cup, every gesture, every meal, half for nourishment, half for heat. Even the bread is baked in earthen ovens lined with bricks, which, once the loaves are removed, are brought inside to warm beds and bellies, stones that feed by day and warm by night. And the strangest discovery of the evening lies folded on the bench beside the hearth, a garment stitched entirely from scraps of old wool socks, mismatched patterns, colours dulled with age, but sewn together with care and padded with crushed straw. It's a sort of tunic, a wearable furnace. For the night watch, someone explains, we take turns keeping the fire alive. It's the warmest thing in the house. You watch the chosen boy pull it over his head. The sleeves dangle. The fit is awful, but his grin says everything. He sits by the fire like a king. You finish your drink. The last of the mulled wine warms your chest. Your fingers trace the edge of the stone in, your lap now cooling but still pleasant. You wonder how many hands have passed it on before you, how many nights it has lit from within like this. A log pops in the hearth, the brazier flickers softly, and the whole room leans in, as if drawn toward the one thing they all crave. Not comfort, but continuity. A flame that lives long enough to be passed on. A warmth not lost but borrowed. You draw your shawl up around your shoulders and breathe in deeply. This isn't a life of abundance, but it is a life of ritual, memory and heat, held, traded, and never taken for granted. Morning comes sharp and blue. The sky outside is clear for once, but that only makes the cold worse. The clouds are gone, and with them any insulating blanket. The frost has crept inside the windows, filigree patterns of ice spreading across the glass like delicate white spider webs. You wake slowly, stiff and bundled, your breath already fogging in the air. Today someone offers you a strange challenge. Spend the day in the shoes of a travelling merchant. Not figuratively, literally. You slip on a pair of old boots brought up from the corner by the door. Thick leather, wide at the toe, heavy at the heel. But when your feet slide in, you feel it immediately. Hay. Not just as lining, but packed tightly around your toes, under your arches, and even behind your heels. You think wool keeps out the cold? The old woman beside you chuckles. Nothing beats dry straw. It crackles as you walk, cushioning each step with a sound like fire underfoot. It's oddly comforting, though it shifts with every movement, and you already know it'll need to be replaced by nightfall. You take your first steps outside, crunching into a path carved through the snow. Every footstep echoes with the swish and scritch of hay in motion. Your feet feel padded, even warm, for now. But these aren't just shoes. They're a strange hybrid between boot, sock and stove, and they're only the beginning. As you walk toward the village square, you begin to notice all the little tricks people use just to walk through winter without going numb. A man stomps past in heavy boots tied with twine and leather scraps, the soles thick with wooden inserts like early insoles meant to lift his foot from the icy ground. Another woman sits on a low bench slipping thin metal inserts, warmed by the hearth, into her shoes before heading to market. She shakes her head. Won't last long, but better than frozen toes. Her husband has wrapped linen rags soaked in tallow around his feet, creating makeshift thermal layers. The fat seals out moisture and traps heat. You spot children running by, their boots stuffed with moss, springy, soft and surprisingly warm when dry. One has rabbit fur tied around his ankles with cords, the fluffy side pressed against bare skin. It's all about keeping the wind out, he tells you, and moving. And that seems to be the secret. Movement. No one stands still. People walk quickly, swing their arms, stamp their feet, even when just waiting in line. Stillness is the enemy. Stillness lets the cold in. You pause near a stall where a tanner is displaying winter shoes, leather uppers, straw-lined soles, and one pair with actual coals sewn into a pouch above the toes. You raise your eyebrows. Dangerous, you ask. Only if you fall asleep wearing them, the man replies without humour. A passing cartman lifts his foot and taps the side of his boot. It's reinforced with layers of bark, carefully shaped to fit between the leather and the sole. Bark, when dried and cured, becomes stiff, but light, an ancient insulator. Birch is best, he says. Pine cracks. Elm rots. Birch never lets the cold in. You glance down at your hay-stuffed boots, suddenly less amused. These people aren't just improvising. They're engineering warmth from scraps, testing and perfecting designs with each season. Even your hay might not be ordinary hay. Some families only use the middle layer of the bale, believing it holds heat better. Others mix it with sheep's wool or dried thistle fluff, brushing it clean every night. And when all else fails, you walk, and keep walking. Because stopping means freezing. You keep walking, not because you have somewhere to go, but because it's warmer than standing still. The wind slices between houses like it's late for a fight, and every breath leaves a sting in your nose. Your straw-stuffed boots are holding up, but the warmth is fading, and you start to understand why people moved with purpose in the old days. It wasn't hustle, it was survival. A man waves you over near the blacksmith's shed. He's crouched beside a bench, adjusting the leather straps of a contraption strapped to his legs. Wooden overshoes, carved like sandals with raised soles that lift his feet above the icy mud. He notices your stare and grins. Keeps the cold from climbing up, he says, and the wet from climbing in. He stands and you hear the scrape of wood against snow. The effect is awkward, but clever. Every centimetre of distance from the frozen ground buys more time before the cold creeps in. You start to notice others. Cork pads, scrap metal layers, even bundles of rags lash between sock and boot. No one walks barefoot, not even indoors. Feet are the first to go. Everyone knows it. Back in the square, a woman sells herbal foot powder, packed in little cloth sachets. Juniper, sage, garlic, and a bit of ash, she says proudly. Keeps out the damp. Keeps out spirits too, if you believe in that sort of thing. A few men nod solemnly. One tucks a sachet into each boot, muttering a prayer. You don't ask which party believes in more, the herbs or the spirits. You pass a workshop where shoemakers are drying shoes by hanging them upside down near the rafters, allowing smoke and heat to rise through the soles. Someone mentions how one man once roasted his boots too close to the fire, and they curled into stiff leather tulips by morning. No one laughed. He'd lost a toe that week. There's a phrase people use here when the temperature drops too far. The frost hunts the slow. You hear it again when a traveller stumbles into town and collapses near the inn door, his boots soaked through. The innkeeper drags him inside, peels off the footwear, and packs hot ashes wrapped in cloth around the man's ankles. No yelling, no rush, just steady hands and practiced steps. They've seen this before. In the back of the inn, a man sits on a stool, carving wooden foot forms, the shape of a human foot slightly exaggerated, used to stretch damp boots overnight. He oils them with animal fat and sets them near the coals. Dry boots in the morning, he says, or blisters by noon. It's all so ordinary, and yet it feels like ceremony. And then someone points to a woman walking in from the eastern road. She's older, wrapped in layers, her boots so wide they look like barrels. When she enters the warmth of the inn, she peels off a layer, and you catch it. Wool inner shoes, padded with moss, wrapped in rabbit fur and coated in beeswax. 20 winters without a frozen toe, she says proudly, holding up a gnarled but intact foot. Everyone claps, not out of politeness, but respect. Because here, a warm foot isn't luck. It's proof of skill. You sip a weak cider by the fire, your own feet finely thawing. You watch as shoes are set near the hearth, as straw is replaced, as old socks are repurposed for padding, and you realise the feet carry the cold first. So the people learned to protect them like they were the foundation of life itself. You're invited to visit the manor house. It's a modest estate, not a palace, but a stone structure with 2 stories, wide fireplaces, and walls that don't weep when the frost comes. The moment you step inside, you feel it. Not warm exactly, but noticeably less cruel. The draught doesn't gnaw at your ears. Your fingers stop trembling. It feels survivable. Your host gestures you into the hall. A fire burns in the grate, not large but steady, and the floors are covered in something unexpected. Rushes, thickly layered across the flagstones. From a distance they look like straw, but underfoot they're soft, fragrant and mixed with dried herbs. Lavender, thyme, chamomile. These aren't just for scent, your host says, watching your toes curl into them. They block the cold, insulate the stone. You glance around the room and notice the other trick. Tapestries. They cover nearly every wall. Huge panels depicting forests, battles, saints and garden scenes. But your guide grins and taps one with the back of her hand. Don't be fooled. They're not for art. They're for heat. Indeed, these woven hangings are more than decoration. They serve as textile insulation, thick enough to muffle wind and absorb the damp chill from the walls. It's said that a good tapestry can raise the temperature in a room by a full degree or two. Not much, but when you're surviving winter in Wool and Hope, a degree is everything. In a bedroom upstairs you find even more tricks. The bed is boxed, with carved wooden panels on all sides, and a heavy curtain that can be drawn shut at night. It's a bed within a room, a cocoon designed to trap body heat. You lean inside and find another surprise. The walls inside the bed box are padded with quilted fabric, sewn thick with wool and stitched directly to the frame. Keeps the warmth in, keeps the damp out, someone explains, and keeps your breath from frosting on the pillows. You brush your hand across the fabric. It's worn but still springy, stitched hundreds of times over, patched with scraps. Even here, in a home with resources, warmth is treated like a thing that must be captured and preserved. The chairs near the hearth are another clue. Each one has a high, curved back, sometimes even wings on the sides. Not for comfort, to catch the heat. Sit in one and the warmth of the fire swirls around your shoulders like a private climate. The poor huddle close to the coals, the rich build furniture to trap the fire in place. In the main hall, a servant passes carrying what looks like a pile of folded carpets. Window covers, your host says, hung at dusk to block the drafts. You look more closely. Woolen panels, heavy and dark, hung from iron rods. Like portable walls made of fabric. Each night they're brought down, each morning rolled up again. Even the doors are double-layered, sometimes with leather flaps on the inside. The handles are wrapped in felt. The hinges are greased not just to prevent squeaks, but to stop the cold metal from radiating frost into the air. You sip from a wooden cup, warm cider, and settle into one of the tall chairs. Around you, the room glows with soft firelight. The fire isn't large, but everything in the room works together to hold it in. And that's when it hits you. Warmth wasn't just heat. It was architecture. You wander further into the manor, the warm cider still swirling inside you like a quiet ember. A maid leads you down a corridor lined with more tapestries, this time thinner, with simple floral patterns. Summer weight, she explains. We change them twice a year. You glance closer and spot tiny stitches along the edges. They're backed with an extra layer of wool. Even the walls are dressed for winter. In a study off the main hall, you find the lord of the house, seated at a desk beside a wall-mounted canopy, hung low above his head like a horizontal curtain. To trap rising heat, he says, smiling as he notices your puzzled look. The ceiling above is high and draughty, too grand to warm fully, so the canopy functions like a lowered roof just above his chair, a personal heat pocket. Even his writing tools are arranged with warmth in mind. The ink bottle rests near the coals kept from freezing. The parchment is stacked between stone slabs, previously heated by the fire, so it doesn't curl or crack in the cold. But the most remarkable part of the manor is tucked behind a velvet curtain near the back. The servant opens it with a quiet flourish, revealing what looks like a tiled wall. green-glazed ceramic rising nearly to the ceiling. You step closer and feel it instantly, radiating warmth. A cockle stove, your host says. German design. We've had it 20 years. The Kachelofen is fueled from behind, often by a separate fire in the kitchen or hallway, and the ceramic tiles retain heat for hours, even after the flames go out. You press your palm to the glazed surface. It's not hot, just gentle, deep, like standing beside the memory of fire. This, the Lord explains, warms the room without the smoke. You nod, suddenly jealous of a technology so elegant it almost seems like cheating. In poorer houses, you've seen the struggle. The braziers, the foot stoves, the crowded beds. Here, it's different. Not necessarily easier, but more refined. Every wall, window, and piece of furniture is a tool, shaped by generations of trial and error. These homes aren't just built for beauty, they're built to resist cold. Even in the servants' quarters you see the same principles at work. Double-thick curtains hang between bunks. The mattresses are stuffed with wool scraps layered over straw. One maid shows you a narrow trench near her bed, where hot stones are slid in each night, wrapped in iron and cloth, like sleeping beside a silent companion. In the kitchen, the floor is warm beneath your feet. You're told it's hollow underneath, with the smoke from the ovens diverted through a shallow tunnel before escaping outside. The floor takes the heat, the cook says. We take whatever the floor doesn't want. She gestures to a group of children napping on old sacks by the hearth. Even the dog has curled into the warmth leaking up from the cracks. You sit near the oven, cradling another cup, and think back to the cottages, the wind slicing through gaps in the walls, the hay bedding turning sour by nightfall, the embers carried from room to room like sacred coals. Here, the heat stays put. But it doesn't come easy. It takes planning, design, generations of clever hands, and it reminds you. Even the wealthy never trusted warmth to last. They built their homes like nests, layered, padded, inward-facing, because they knew winter couldn't be beaten. It could only be outwitted. You leave the manor at dusk. The sky's purple-blue now, heavy with the smell of coming snow. As you walk down the winding path toward the village, the air sharpens again, slipping past your cloak like a whisper with teeth. The warmth of the tiled stove fades from your skin faster than you'd like. By the time you reach the first cottage, you're cold again. Not desperately, but enough to make your teeth click when you breathe through your mouth. You step inside a peasant home, low ceiling, dirt floor, walls patched with daub and timber. There's no cockle stove here, just a small hearth with a weak flame and the smell of old smoke. The difference between this and the manor is immediate. It's not just colder, it's unforgiving. The room is dim. A single oil lamp flickers on a wooden beam. A woman kneels at the fire, coaxing the embers. Around her, children sit close, not saying much, their faces dull with the blankness of long cold days. A man returns from outside, stomping his boots and clutching his chest. It's biting tonight, he mutters. No one replies. They already know. He joins the others at the hearth, and that's when you notice. There's no furniture nearby, no chairs, no benches, just bodies, huddled low, as close to the fire as the room will allow. This is how the poor survive winter, not by designing warm houses, but by gathering all warmth into one single point, like animals nesting in straw. There's no insulation in the walls, no tapestries. Instead, you see scraps of old clothing nailed to the timber, forming patchwork curtains meant to slow the wind. You touch one, a bit of linen stiff with age. It barely moves. The wind finds its way around it anyway. Someone hands you a cup. It's warm, but barely. A thin gruel made of oats and onion peel, more broth than meal. You sip slowly. It doesn't taste like much, but it warms your throat. A boy rolls over and shows you a cloth bundle. Inside are 3 flat stones still warm from the fire. "We keep them under the covers," he says. "My sister pretends they're sleeping pigs." You smile, even though your hands are beginning to sting again. It's not just heat that's scarce here, it's space. You count 6 people and 2 beds. The mother explains they rotate sleeping spots. Whoever worked hardest that day sleeps closest to the hearth. The oldest sleep on the outside. The youngest are tucked between, forming a living wall of warmth. Above the hearth hangs a bundle of dried mullein leaves, soft, fuzzy, and used not only as a makeshift insulator, but also as cough remedy. "The cold makes the lungs bark," the father says. He doesn't need to explain further. You've heard that cough in every house. Even the dog curled in a ragged blanket near the ashes serves a purpose. Not as a pet, but as a source of warmth. No one cuddles him, but when he's not there they miss his heat. And yet, despite the harshness, there's a quiet endurance here. Every movement is measured. Every ember is precious. They don't ask for more warmth. They just work together to keep what little they have. You sit with them until the last log splits and the fire sighs low. And then the mother brings out a blanket, patched, heavy, and spreads it across everyone sitting by the hearth. No one speaks, because silence conserves heat too. The blanket she spreads over the group is thick with history, stitched from dozens of fabrics, each square a remnant of something that once had another purpose. A shirt worn thin at the elbows, a baby's swaddling cloth, an apron that survived 2 winters before fraying beyond repair. You run your fingers across the seams and feel the ridges of a life patched together. The children beneath it don't squirm or chatter. They lean into each other like bricks in a wall, each one a part of the whole. This isn't just comfort, it's infrastructure. Warmth here isn't individual, it's collective. The father adds a final handful of splinters to the fire. The flames glow weakly, casting just enough light to show the soot-streaked rafters. On one of the beams, bundles of dried nettles and hops hang upside down. "Not for food," the mother murmurs. "We boil them in cloth," makes a heating poultice for sore chests. She rubs her own ribs absently as she speaks. On the floor near the fire you notice a shallow pan, flat black and dented. "Old brazier," someone explains. "No coals to spare these days. We use it to warm stones now, or sit on it when it's coldest." You glance over. There's already a girl sitting on it, legs crossed, looking half asleep. "Cold from above, warm from below," she mumbles, without opening her eyes. And in that moment, you realise something that hadn't hit you fully before. For the poor, winter is not a season. It's a siege. Every day is a negotiation between what they have and what they can afford to lose. Fuel, food, fabric, breath. There's no buffer, no margin of error. And yet they've developed a system that works, not efficiently, not comfortably, but just enough. In the far corner, a teenager tends a tiny clay oil lamp, its flame no bigger than a thumbnail. It sits beneath a small iron bowl, warming a few scraps of linen. She picks one up, wraps it around her hands, and passes it to her grandmother. Not to fix anything, just to take the sting out of the cold. A moment of warmth is enough. You ask about quilts, about extra bedding. The father laughs quietly. "We've got more people than wool." But then he points to the walls. Tucked into every crack, behind every rafter, behind pots and baskets and shelves, you see them. Bundles of fabric, tightly rolled, jammed into place. Some are old shawls. Others look like strips of burlap dipped in wax. "They block the wind," he says, "and in spring we shake them out and wear them again." Nothing here is waste. Nothing here is only one thing. Even the ashes from the hearth are saved in a clay pot. Tomorrow they'll be mixed with water and used to scrub clothes, or packed into small sachets to place in shoes and under blankets to absorb damp. You sit back and feel the rhythm of the room, slow, dim, but full of intent. A family doesn't endure a winter like this with firewood alone. They survive with habits, closeness, and knowing the value of even a single fading ember. Later that night, you'll return to your bed, but part of you will still feel the shared weight of that patchwork blanket, and the warmth of 6 people who said nothing, but shared everything. The next morning brings a sharp wind from the east and a layer of frost so thick it crunches underfoot like shattered glass. You pull your cloak tighter, but it doesn't help much. Cold like this seeps past fabric. It aims for the bones, and so today you seek out something different. Not fires, not hay, but footwear. The kind that people once claimed could outwit even the meanest winter. You're pointed toward a cobbler at the edge of the village, an older man with soot on his fingertips and a small forge in the back of his shed. Inside, dozens of shoes hang from the beams like sleeping bats, odd shapes, uneven seams, strange additions stitched or nailed into place. He grins as you step in. Looking for warm feet, are you? You nod. He gestures to a stool. Let me show you what didn't work first. He holds up a pair of low leather boots, worn smooth and cracking at the toe. These were fine for autumn, but come frost. Death traps. He flips one over to reveal a hollow sole where straw was meant to be stuffed. Too thin, straw got wet, froze to the leather. Man lost 2 toes trying to walk to church. You flinch. He moves on. Another pair, higher, laced to mid-calf, reinforced with felted wool sewn between 2 leather layers. Better, he says. Held up well, wool wicked the damp, but the seams leaked. Took me 3 winters to find the right stitch. Then he sets down a heavier boot. It thuds, not leather. Wooden clogs, lined inside with old cloth and packed tight with animal hair. For market days, he says. Cold from below, wet from the snow, and the street was more muck than road. Wood stayed dry. Hair kept the heat. He taps the side. Ugly, but they worked. You ask if people ever heated their shoes. He nods slowly. Aye, slipped heated stones inside before walking, but risky. One crack in the leather, and the warmth leaks out before you reach the gate. He shows you a blackened heel from a pair that came too close to the fire. The leather warped, ruined. A good shoe must trap heat, not chase it. Then comes the strangest pair yet. Slippers? No. Heels? Not quite. These are soft-soled boots stitched from layers of felt, leather and fur sewn facing inward. Rabbit from the look of it. The cuffs are padded with linen rags soaked in tallow, then dried until stiff. We called them sleeper boots, he says. Not for walking far, but if your bed was stone cold, these kept the sole from slipping out your feet. You pick one up. It's light, oddly shaped, but you can imagine the warmth, not just physical, psychological, hope in the form of a ridiculous patched-together boot. Nearby a younger boy, his apprentice, brings over a small tray. On it are things you've never associated with shoes: crushed eggshells, wool grease, powdered bark. Fillers, he explains, for stuffing inside cracked soles. Anything that holds heat and doesn't rot. You smile. It sounds like madness, but it worked. And in a world where cold finds every gap, the humble shoe became a last defence. The cobbler sets the last boot aside, then beckons you toward the back of the workshop, where the light grows dim and the air smells faintly of oil, ash, and something sweet. Birch tar, perhaps. On a low shelf he pulls out a battered wooden box. Inside it, shoe parts that don't match, scraps of fur, patches of wool, even what looks like dried moss. These here, he says, were the poor man's insulation kit. You pick up a bundle of rags tied with string. When you squeeze it, the centre is soft and slightly spongy. Moss and sheep's wool, he explains. Worn inside the boot or instead of a boot. You'd press it flat, warm it by the fire, then wrap your feet and hope for the best. Next to it lies a coil of nettle thread, tough and wiry. We used this to stitch leather, but also to wrap boots tight when the laces snapped. People didn't toss shoes. They rewrapped them. Again and again, he pauses. If you couldn't afford a cobbler, you became one. You ask about slippers, and he laughs. In a cottage? Maybe if you had leftover scraps and warm floors, but out here a slipper was just a wet sock pretending to be a shoe. He does admit some families made indoor boots lined with rabbit fur and stuffed with dried mint. The smell helped. So did the prayers. He leans forward and lifts one final object from the box. A metal sole insert shaped roughly like a human foot, battered and blackened from countless firings. This was a merchant's, he says quietly. Kept it by the hearth. Heated it red hot, slid it into a boot lined with 2 layers of wool. By the time he got outside, he could walk a mile before the chill caught up. You hand it back carefully. It's heavier than you expected, a relic of war against frost. Then something catches your eye. Hanging from the beam above, a strange set of leather straps with loops, hooks, and what appears to be a pouch. Leg warmers, the boy says, stuffed with hay or fabric, tied from the knee to the ankle. Sometimes you'd hang a hot potato in the pouch before walking. Better than nothing. And yes, they did eat the potato later. Back near the front of the shop, you see a few modern-looking boots, or what passes for them here, stitched with thick waxed thread, double-soled, high-backed, and reinforced with boiled leather toes. They look like armour. The cobbler taps one with pride. Took me 12 days to make, lined with rabbit fur, calf leather, old wool, and the soul of an impatient fox. You chuckle. He's not joking. Outside, snow begins to fall in fat, silent flakes. The cobbler reaches for his own shoes, wrapped in felt and patched too many times to count. These old things still work, he says. Not pretty, but I walk, and I feel my toes. That's enough. You step into your own pair of hay-packed boots. They rustle. Your feet are stiff. But they are not cold. And that in a place like this is a small kind of wealth. That evening the cold deepens again. Not just outside, where frost needles its way into tree bark and stone walls, but inside too. The fire in your host's hearth is burning low, and there's no more wood for the night. You already know how this goes. The coals will be banked in ash, the warmer stones buried under blankets, and bodies will press in tighter as the temperature falls. But tonight, something's different. There are more people than usual. A traveller arrived at dusk, cloaked, frostbitten, and alone. No one turned him away. Instead, they offered him soup, dry socks, and the only bed corner left. It's a tight fit. But tightness is a form of warmth, and that's when someone mentions the snow policy. You ask what that means. The eldest woman in the room, already settling down on her straw pallet, looks up and explains in a tone as plain as boiled oats. When the snow comes too heavy, you sleep side by side. Doesn't matter if you argue. Doesn't matter if you're strangers. You glance around the room. No one seems surprised. It's not just hospitality, it's physics. In winter's grip, your own warmth is never enough. You need the heat of others, friend or foe, child or elder, familiar or not. So tonight, you lay side by side with people you barely know. There's no shame in it. The room becomes one heaving, breathing organism, swaddled in wool, sharing coughs and quiet dreams. You're placed in the middle. Newcomer luck, they call it. The sides are always colder. The man to your left is wrapped in a coat that still smells faintly of a horse and snow. The girl to your right is already asleep, her head tucked into the crook of her arm. A boy lies at your feet, curled around a warm rock wrapped in a torn bit of curtain. No one speaks, but there's movement. Slow, sleepy shifts. Someone pulls the shared blanket tighter. Someone else shuffles closer, muttering apologies. This isn't comfort, it's strategy. Somewhere near the door, a baby whimpers. Her mother brings her close, tucks her beneath 2 layers of wool, and murmurs something in a language older than the village. The baby quiets. In the far corner someone snores. No one minds. A snore means breath, and breath means life. You lie still and begin to feel it, the air between bodies becoming warm, dense. The frozen world outside stops clawing at the windows. Inside it's not toasty, but it's bearable. You understand now why so many inns in the past offered shared sleeping quarters, why even wealthy travellers occasionally found themselves shoulder to shoulder with a stranger. When the cold comes fast, warmth becomes a shared currency, and pride is worth less than body heat. You remember something else too. Stories of soldiers during winter campaigns, forced to huddle in trenches and barns, using their enemies' fallen coats for insulation, burying themselves beneath horses' blankets, even curling up beside each other without speaking, not out of trust, out of need. And now, so many years and centuries later, here you are, breathing slowly, curled under borrowed cloth, pressed against people whose names you didn't learn, and yet you're warmer than you've been all week. Because for one night, the village becomes a single organism of survival. Warmth passed from heart to hip to heel and back again. You don't sleep deeply that night, but you sleep steadily. The kind of rest that comes not from comfort, but from a body that finally, mercifully, stops shivering. You drift in and out, wrapped not just in wool, but in the hum of shared breath, the creak of the beams, and the gentle weight of another's elbow against your ribs. At some point, someone shifts and tucks a fold of cloth under your neck. You never see who, but it helps. You don't thank them. You just exhale and let your body sink lower into the collective warmth. When dawn arrives, no one jumps up. The room is a slow stew of limbs and blankets, half waking and stretching beneath a roof that's already gathering new frost. Someone farts. Someone laughs. The day begins as all freezing days do, not with urgency, but with negotiation. When to leave the bed. When to let the cold in again. As people begin to stir, you hear the old woman again. The snow policy, she says, pulling her shawl tighter, is why even enemies used to sleep back to back. You raise an eyebrow, she nods. Didn't matter if you hated each other. If it was cold enough, you slept touching. One man dies, the other wakes up dead. She doesn't say it for drama. It's simply a rule. In border towns, she tells you, even traders from rival lands knew the custom. If you arrived at Mountain Pass late and the snow had already started falling, you sought shelter in the nearest barn or way station, and slept beside whoever else was there. There are stories of nobles curling beside outlaws, of debtors beside their collectors, of spies beside the very people they were meant to watch. You imagine that. A crackling fire in the centre of a lodge, 6 figures lying head to toe beneath shared furs. No names, no knives, just the pulse of human heat pushing back the winter. And the next morning, everyone gets up and goes their separate ways, no questions asked. Because in that moment, you were not enemies. You were survivors of the same night. Back in the room, someone begins folding up the patchwork blanket. Another rolls the warm stone back toward the hearth for reheating. A girl scoops up the baby and presses her cheek to its head. Still warm, she says. She didn't even stir. Someone tosses a few sticks onto the coals. Not enough for a blaze, just enough to tease the edge off the air. You sit up and pull your boots on, stiff from yesterday but blessedly dry. The floor is freezing, but your chest, your back, your thighs, they remember the warmth. It lingers longer than you expected. And as people start preparing for the day, boiling, grain, shaking out clothes, digging potatoes from under straw, you hear murmurs about the night ahead. Who's travelling? Who's staying? Who might need a spot near the hearth? No one gets turned away. Because in winter, the lines between friend and stranger melt just enough to let the heat pass through. You button your cloak, nod your thanks, and step outside into the cold. And already, you miss the weight of bodies beside you. Not for company, for survival. You don't get far before your nose starts to sting again. The morning frost clings to your lashes. The breath in your scarf freezes in tiny spikes. You're heading to the edge of the village now, toward the older cottages, the ones without chimneys. Smoke curls from their doors instead, drifting out in low clouds, curling around broken stone and soot-stained eaves. One of the houses draws your attention right away. Its thatched roof is patched with cloth, the door sagging on a single hinge. But inside the air hits you like a wall, thick, hot, and choking. You cough almost immediately, your throat closing up in surprise. There's no hearth, just a fire pit dug into the centre of the dirt floor surrounded by 3 stones. On it sits a blackened iron pot. The flames lick upward, licking at the air greedily. The smoke has nowhere to go. It hangs in a permanent haze near the ceiling, seeping into every surface. This is a smokehouse, though not in the way you imagined. There's no chimney, no real vent, just gaps in the roof and a crude window shuttered with animal hide. The air is so thick you can barely see across the room. And yet, people live here. They choose this. You ask the old man by the fire how they manage. He shrugs. Chimneys waste heat. Smoke holds it in. It sounds absurd, but the more you sit, the more you feel it. The room is warm, damp but warm. Every surface, the walls, the ceiling, even the clothes hanging from nails, is steeped in the heat of wood smoke. There are no draughts, no cold corners. The air is heavy, but it wraps around you like a cloak. A girl stirs a pot of soup with a long stick. She squints through the haze. Her eyes are red-rimmed and her voice is hoarse, but she doesn't seem bothered. "It's always like this," you ask. "Only in winter," she replies. "When it's warmer, we open the roof." You glance up. There in the centre beam is a hole, currently covered with an old wool shawl. On clear days they pull it back. On cold ones they seal the heat in with the smoke. You begin to notice how the room is arranged. Beds, if you can call them that, are pushed close to the fire pit with piles of rags or skins for bedding. The walls are blackened with soot. Pots, pans and spoons all have a dull grey coat of ash. Even the water jug is warm to the touch. Not from fire, but from simply sitting in the room. And the meat? It hangs from the rafters, salted and wrapped in cloth. The smoke cures it, slowly, constantly. This house doesn't just heat and feed its people. It preserves what little they have, all with the same fire. A child sneezes. No one reacts. Another coughs, thick and wet. Still no reaction. You realise then, this isn't just a method. It's a sacrifice. These people are willing to breathe in smoke every day, just to breathe at all come spring. Because here the enemy isn't soot, it's frost, and smoke, heavy, harsh and unwelcome, is the only barrier they have left. You sit quietly by the fire pit, eyes watering, lungs working harder with every breath. The smoke isn't just something in the air, it's the air. It wraps around you, presses into your clothes, clings to your hair. Everything here is saturated with it. You glance down at your hands, now streaked with soot from brushing the wall. Across from you, a woman folds a bundle of cloth, damp rags soaked in vinegar and herbs, which she presses against her children's faces before they sleep. Keeps the cough away, she explains, and keeps the cold from settling too deep in their lungs. A bundle of sage and pine resin burns slowly on a nearby tile, not for scent, for thickening the smoke. They believe it helps seal the warmth in, makes it stick to the bones, keeps illness out. Whether it works or not, you can't say, but here the act itself matters. In a winter where there are no choices, a ritual becomes a kind of resistance. The old man sets another log on the open fire. The room flares brighter, hotter. You flinch, expecting the rush of smoke to choke you again, but nothing changes. The smoke just thickens. No one even blinks. They're used to it. Their bodies have adapted over years and generations to this strange exchange. Lungs for heat. You ask why they don't build chimneys. He laughs, not unkindly. We did once. Cold found us the same night. He pauses. The heat ran out faster than a thief through a church door. You realise then, a chimney isn't always a luxury. Sometimes it's a leak. When the fire is weak, when the wood is damp, when the frost gnaws at the door, even the smoke becomes precious. In one corner, an older girl rubs her feet with a cloth dipped in goose fat and ash. It's gritty, strange, and deeply effective. She wraps them in rags, then slips them into felt slippers with straw soles. Smoke dries the skin, she says, but cracked skin kills faster. Someone stirs beside you, then stands, lifting a flat stone slab from beside the pit. He flips it, exposing the underside, which is still warm. It's placed on the floor and covered with a wool cloth. The baby will sleep there tonight, closer to the ground, closer to the warmth. We move them around as the heat fades, the father says, gesturing to 3 other stones in different stages of cooling. You hadn't noticed before. The house is laid out like a clock, with the fire at the centre, and every person, every bed, every pot and stone placed according to how much warmth they can catch before it escapes. The firewood pile is low. Each log added to the fire is chosen carefully. Pine crackles but burns too fast. Oak smoulders, perfect for the overnight. Poplar stinks, but they use it anyway when nothing else is left. Every decision is a calculation of heat, time, and cost. The baby fusses, then goes quiet. The smoke curls. And as you rise to leave, brushing soot from your cloak, you take one last look at the family seated in the haze, faces glowing faintly, eyes steady, not blinking. They don't fear the smoke, they fear the silence that comes when the fire burns out. The next house you visit doesn't smell like smoke or soup, it smells like manure. You hesitate at the doorway, wondering if you've taken a wrong turn. But no, this is exactly where they meant to send you. A squat stone building, low roof, no windows. A single door made of thick planks reinforced with iron nails. It opens inward and you duck your head to step inside. The warmth hits you immediately. It's not fire, not steam, not even breath. It's animals. You blink, adjusting to the dim light. To your left, cows, 2 of them, lying in a bed of hay, their broad sides rising and falling in sleepy rhythm. To your right, goats, smaller but just as warm, chewing lazily and occasionally nudging each other with dull horns. In the centre, a narrow ladder leads to a loft above. A man leans down from the hatch above and waves you up. Come on then, mind the pitchfork. You climb slowly, your hands brushing cold wood, and emerge into the hayloft, low-ceilinged, packed tight with straw and blankets, and surprisingly cosy. A row of sleeping mats lines the floor. Above, rafters blackened with soot. Below, the body heat of animals rising like breath through the boards. We call it the warm barn, the man says, patting the straw beside him. Better than the cottage on nights like this. You lie down. The floor is uneven, the hay prickles your back, and something small and skittering brushes your ankle. But the warmth? It's thick, earthy, constant. A full 10 degrees warmer than the frost-laced air outside. He points to the vent hole in the wall, shuttered with leather. We close it at night, open it when it gets wet in here. Doesn't smell so bad once you get used to it. You take a slow breath. He's right. The stink fades quickly under the weight of heat. A living furnace hums beneath you. The cows grunt. The goats shift. A hen clucks somewhere near the beams. You ask how long people have slept above animals. He smiles. Long as there's been winter. In much of rural Europe, especially in the mountains and northern regions, this was standard practice. Not poverty, not shame. Design. The animals stay safe from the cold. The humans stay warm without burning a single log. One fire warms the soup. One goat warms the bed. Another woman climbs up into the loft with a bundle of cloth. She spreads it out, a large patchwork quilt, and invites you to help. As you unfold it, you notice the underside is slick, greased leather. We sew old coats together, she says. Leather down, wool up, stops the damp from creeping through. Every trick here is practical. Nothing is elegant, but it all works. Even the children sleep here, curled in tight balls, wrapped like turnips in cloth and rags. One girl sleeps with a clay jug tucked to her stomach. Milk jug, the man explains. We drink it cold in the morning, but warm it now, and it gives back all night. Below, one of the cows shifts. A wave of animal heat rolls up. Through the floorboards, you sigh and sink deeper into the straw. This isn't just survival. This is collaboration between species. No gods, no magic, no machines. Just goats, straw, and body heat. And you, listening to them breathe. You wake to a sound that isn't human. A low, moist exhale from directly below you, followed by the shift of hooves on straw and a faint, rhythmical chewing. The cow beneath your sleeping spot is already up, already warming the loft with the quiet, tireless engine of her body. Around you, the rest of the loft is still. No one else has stirred yet. You stay wrapped in the quilt, listening. Every breath of the animal beneath you is like a bellows puffing under the floorboards. You've never felt so grateful for a creature you didn't speak to. Eventually one of the children rustles from the far end of the loft and slides over beside you, barefoot and blinking. She doesn't speak. She just places a flat, warm stone into your hands already wrapped in cloth. Someone prepared it during the night, heated it near the hearth or fire pit, then brought it up wrapped in rags to be passed quietly from body to body. We call it the morning sun, she whispers. The warmth in the stone is fading fast, but it still holds enough comfort to bring feeling back to your fingers. You smile and pass it to the next sleepy figure without a word. Below, the animals are fed. The rustle of hay, the occasional bleat or shuffle, all blend together in a kind of music, the sound of passive, patient warmth. This barn, which would seem filthy or absurd in another time, now feels like the safest place on earth. The woman from last night arrives with a bowl of warm mash and hands it out spoon by spoon, mostly oats and water, but heated and thick enough to keep your belly from growling. A few drops of goat's milk are stirred into the children's bowls. The meal is eaten in silence, too cold to talk, too early to hope, and yet there's peace here. You notice, too, how everything in the loft serves dual purposes. A ladder doubles as a drying rack for damp woolen socks. A wooden beam stores clay jugs, half buried in hay to retain warmth. Even the chickens, a few of which wander the upper loft, contribute. Not just eggs, but body heat. Their feathers puff out, their tiny claws clatter on wood, and no one shoos them away. You ask the man why they live up here for so much of the winter. Because wood runs out, he says simply, but cows don't. And that's the heart of it. The fire needs feeding every hour, but the cow breathes all night. She exhales heat like a gift. She warms your feet without asking for anything in return, just a stool, some hay, and the rhythm of daily care. The child beside you points to a beam above. Carved into it are dozens of small marks, rows scratched carefully by hand. Winters, she says. Each mark is a year we slept here. Mama said the worst one was the winter of 5 chickens and no fire. You think of that. 5 chickens. No fire. Just people and animals curled together, breathing warmth into each other through nights long enough to feel like they'd never end. And somehow, they made it. You run your fingers across the nearest mark, still rough from the blade that carved it, and you realise this is more than a barn. It's a memory of survival etched into wood and wool and breath. You step outside the barn and the cold greets you like a slap. Sharp, clean, and absolute. For a moment your lungs don't even want the air. It feels too raw, too pure. Behind you, the barn glows faintly with heat, like a breathing thing, reluctant to let you go. But now you're heading uphill, through frost-stiff grass and across a brittle wooden footbridge. The sun's not up yet, but there's light, a silver haze filtering through low clouds. In the distance, the roof of a stone cottage peeks through a veil of white smoke. Not chimney smoke, something else. You follow it. The smell hits first, not fire, not manure. Something sweet, musky, almost floral, and then you see it. A steaming trench, maybe a metre deep, running alongside the cottage. A man is knee-deep in it, wearing only a loose tunic and heavy gloves, shoveling slowly, methodically. You blink. The trench isn't full of water. It's rotting leaves. "I know how it looks," he calls without looking up, "but it's warm down here." You take a hesitant step closer. The ground is warm beneath your boots, soggy but not frozen. There's heat rising gently, invisibly. The leaves, oak, birch, bracken, straw, garden waste, are fermenting, and in doing so, they're generating warmth. He finally straightens and gestures toward a series of shallow pits and troughs, carved in the earth, all filled with decomposing matter. "This one's for the pigs," he says, pointing to a bed where a pair of hogs doze atop steaming compost. "That one's ours." You look again at the trench. There's a wooden lid nearby, thick and padded with old sheepskin. "At night we cover it. Lie on top," he says. "It stays warm till morning." Compost, as bedding. You don't know whether to be horrified or impressed. "The trick," he says, "is in the layering. You want the green stuff at the bottom. Grass, vegetable peels, then leaves, then straw, then a cloth, like a lasagna." You laugh in surprise. He grins. It's not glamorous, but it's free, and warm, and the smell. You stop noticing after 2 nights. You kneel, and place your hand on the edge of the trench. It's hot. Not warm, hot. Almost uncomfortably so. "We sleep on hay bales on top," he continues, "then flip to a fresh pile every 3 days. The old stuff goes to the garden when the frost lifts. Nothing's wasted." And it's true. Nothing is. They even have small compost beds built inside the walls of their livestock shelter, feeding off waste and scraps, warming both animals and humans from the ground up. It's like a hidden furnace, messy, quiet, organic. Later, as you're invited in for tea, you spot another trick. A stool with a compost box inside, sealed except for a small slit where heat can rise. The old man's wife sits on it, knitting, her feet warmed by the faint, earthy breath of decomposition. You realise this isn't a last resort. It's an invention born of stubbornness, a refusal to freeze. You sit, you sip, you warm, and somewhere beneath your feet something quietly decays, and in that decay offers you life. The old man leads you around the side of the cottage, boots squelching softly through the frost-softened earth. Most folks think the ground dies in winter, he says, but truth is, it just changes jobs. You follow him to a second trench, this one narrower, boxed in with planks like a raised bed, but still steaming gently. Thin wisps of vapour drift upward from between the cracks. On top of the heap, laid neatly in a row, are terracotta jars wrapped in cloth. He lifts one carefully. This one's for sleeping. The others are for socks, gloves, bread. Anything you want to feel like it just came from the sun. He pulls back the cloth, revealing the jar's underside warm to the touch. Try it, he offers, and when you do, your fingers tingle with welcome heat. These aren't just compost piles anymore. They're outdoor heaters, warming lockers, foot warmers, drying racks, and slow cookers all at once. Inside, his daughter pulls a cabbage from the cellar, still crisp and cold, and tucks it into the compost box by the hearth. Not to cook it, she says, catching your look, just to make it less cruel to eat. The core will warm enough by noon that the leaves won't snap your teeth. Later, they show you the compost path, a narrow walkway from barn to cottage lined with straw-filled troughs underfoot. The straw is mixed with manure, vegetable waste and kitchen scraps. Covered by wooden planks, the entire path radiates a low, constant warmth. You walk on it in shock, each step pressing into gently heated wood. Warms your feet and the chickens, the old man chuckles. They know where the warm line is. They follow it like pilgrims. You spot one now, a single hen waddling across the yard, never stepping off the compost line. She knows better than to stray from the warmth. So do the sheepdogs, who curl up next to the largest pile and twitch their legs as they sleep in what must feel like a sauna compared to the open fields. You sit again by the fire that night, your back warmed by the compost stove built into the wall, and you try to imagine going home to cold tiles and frozen car seats. And it occurs to you, this isn't just survival. This is biological central heating, powered by peelings and pruning and the patience to tend the rot. It's not glamorous, it's not clean, but it works. And every warm seat, every softened crust, every jar that doesn't crack from the frost, that's a little miracle. Before you leave, the old man presses something into your hand. It's a small booklet, stained and thumbed through. On the front, How to Build a Compost Furnace, 1846. A reprint from an old farmer's almanac. You might not need it now, he says, but someday someone will. You tuck it into your coat, because heat, after all, is something you never stop chasing. And sometimes the strangest paths to warmth are the ones that began in a pile of yesterday's scraps. You're back in the city now, or what passes for one in this age of coal smoke and cobblestones. The streets are narrow and slick with a slush that never quite freezes nor melts. The buildings huddle close together like people seeking warmth from one another, but this morning your guide leads you somewhere different. Bath House, he says, his breath blooming in the chill, but not the kind you're thinking of. You expect marble floors and steam. What you get is a cellar under a bakery, hidden by a warped wooden door and a curtain of hanging cloth. Inside, the air is thick and damp but gloriously warm. And not just warm, it's humid, fragrant, alive. A group of women are seated around a central stone pit filled with hot bricks and buckets of water, their sleeves rolled up, their feet bare. They're bathing, but not in the usual way. Steam bathing, they call it. There's no actual bath here, just buckets of hot water, towels and heat pulled from whatever source they can find. Some soak strips of cloth in water, wrap their legs, and sit beside the bricks until the cold is chased from their bones. One woman nods at you and gestures toward an empty stool. "Cold in your chest?" she asks, voice raspy. "Steam'll loosen it. We add herbs sometimes. Thyme, rosemary, vinegar." You sit, hesitant. The woman drops a spoonful of vinegar into a bucket and immediately the air changes. Sharper, almost medicinal. Your nose stings. Your lungs open. "This is for the poor," she says. "But don't feel bad. The rich sweat the same as we do." You look around. Everything here is reused. Old copper pots, chipped mugs, second-hand stones, wood worn smooth by thousands of hands. No fancy plumbing, no porcelain, but everyone is warm, everyone is steaming, and no one is alone. In the far corner, an old man rubs his hands with a cloth dipped in hot ale. "For the joints," he mutters, "and the mood." Someone laughs and passes around a plate of roasted chestnuts pulled straight from the bakery oven above. That oven, you learn, is what powers the warmth here. The bakery upstairs bakes through the night, and the heat sinks into the cellar. They collect the runoff warmth. Nothing is wasted. You never thought of bread as a central heating system, but that's exactly what this is. You close your eyes. The scent of thyme and toasted grain. The low murmur of voices. The gentle hiss of vinegar in water. You could fall asleep here, and people do. Your guide leans over. They used to call places like this sweat parlours. Not glamorous, but when the pipes froze and the coals ran out, these places kept people alive. You imagine the nights before central heating, before radiators and boilers, when warmth wasn't a switch on the wall, but a place, a ritual, a borrowed fire from someone else's labour. This isn't a luxury, it's a necessity disguised as community. And as your hands thaw and your face flushes, you realise staying warm wasn't just about comfort, it was about connection. You came here for heat, but what you found was humanity. Later that day, you return to the same alley, but this time your guide takes you to a neighbouring cellar. The bakery heat doesn't quite reach here. The air is colder, but the room hums with a low, steady buzz of activity. A man in a thick wool coat is fanning something in the corner. You expect fire. But there's no flame, just a glowing pile of stones resting in a shallow iron pit, and beside it, a stack of bricks wrapped in flannel. "Welcome to the brick library," he says with a wink. You stare. Apparently in this part of town, residents used to bring their own bricks to a local kiln, heated communally once a day. After baking bread or pottery, the oven master would allow neighbours to place their bricks inside to absorb residual heat. Then, each person would carry their warm brick home, wrapped in cloth, tucked under coats, or slid beneath blankets. No money exchanged, just timing. "We each get about 30 minutes of carry heat," he explains. "Enough to sleep with if you're quick." He picks up a brick wrapped in old linen and offers it to you. It radiates a deep, steady warmth, a pocket-sized sun. "Keep it against your belly or at your feet, but don't hold it too tight," he warns. "I've seen cracked skin." They have rules here too. 1 brick per person. Return by morning. No hoarding. In colder months the kiln fires twice. Once for food, once for heat bricks. You spot a shelf labelled infants. Smaller bricks. Lighter. Wrapped in soft flannel, stored in woven baskets. "We preheat cradles with those," someone says, or slip them into cots before the child goes in. Nearby, a young boy is lining his boots with charcoal packets wrapped in cloth, like tiny pillows. "Trick I learned from my gran," he says. "They keep warm longer than you'd think." Another woman shows you her stone satchel, a small leather pouch lined with rabbit fur and filled with polished pebbles warmed earlier in the communal pot. "This," she says, placing it gently on her lap, keeps the rheumatism from chewing at my bones. Everyone here is adapting, rethinking heat, carrying it, storing it, sharing it. The brick library also has a sign-out board, just names and tick marks, but it's organised with precision. You note a special slot for widows who are granted early access, and one for those who lost coal rations this week. You realise warmth here is rationed not just by need, but by compassion. Before leaving, your guide whispers, "This used to be an old smuggler's den. Now it keeps children from freezing. Funny how places change." You step back outside, the chill biting your cheeks, and tuck your newly warmed brick into your coat. You walk slowly, the warmth travelling from your ribs to your fingertips. For a moment, you feel invincible. A single, heated brick, carried like treasure. A city full of strangers bound by the same quiet goal, not to freeze. And in that stubborn act of shared survival, you find something rare, a kind of warmth that has nothing to do with fire. You're far from the city now. The roads have turned to dirt, the stone houses spaced wide apart, smoke curling from their low chimneys. A heavy frost grips the hedgerows, and the fields stretch pale and brittle beneath a silver dawn. The cottage ahead looks like any other, modest, mossy, slouching slightly under the weight of the roof. But inside, something different waits. You duck through the low door and a wave of dry heat hits your face. It's not from a fireplace, not from a stove. Instead, it comes from above. You look up. The entire ceiling is strung with peat bricks, dangling like ornaments from rafters using loops of twine. Above them, tucked between the ceiling beams, are thick bundles of dried heather, bracken and wool scraps, layered deliberately. Your guide grins. "Welcome to the overhead furnace." The system is ingenious. Peat bricks are dried and slightly warmed by the rising heat of the cooking hearth below. The thermal mass in the ceiling slowly releases warmth downward, creating a blanket of ambient heat that lingers even after the fire dies. "And the bracken?" you ask. "Insulation," she replies, "so the roof doesn't steal it all." A boy toddles by wearing a hat with dangling rocks sewn into the flaps. "For the ears," the woman explains. "They're river stones pre-warmed by the hearth." You wander to the kitchen, where an older man is brushing a thin coat of goose fat onto the inner windows, not to cook with, but to insulate. It's an old trick. Goose fat reduces frost build-up, trapping a thin layer of oily warmth on the glass. "And for us," he says, pointing to a jar on the table, "we take a little fat on the chest, the back, even the feet." You try it, just a dab, and the heat is almost immediate. Trapped under wool, your skin hums with life again. But the real surprise is yet to come. They lead you to the bedroom, not a room really, but a corner behind a heavy curtain. Inside is a bed built not of wood but stone. Smooth slabs form the base, hollowed beneath like a trough. Your eyebrows raise. "Go ahead," she says, "lie down." You do, and it's warm. The woman pulls aside a trapdoor beside the bed and reveals a subterranean channel, a shallow trench running under the floor filled with ash-warmed sand. The stone bed sits above it like a platform. The sand is heated during the day by coals, and the warmth seeps up through the rock overnight. "It's how my grandfather survived the famine winters," she says. "Stone remembers heat longer than flesh." You lie still for a while, your breath slowing. Even without a blanket, the stone hums with gentle heat. Not fierce, not hot, just enough to coax your bones into rest. She tucks a wool curtain around the bed frame, sealing you in like a nest. It's darker now, quieter. The world reduced to warmth and wool and a faint scent of heather smoke. In this quiet chamber of stone and ingenuity, you realize again, heat, in the past, was not just hunted. It was captured, trapped, stored, and stewarded like treasure, and sometimes it even hung from the ceiling. Later that evening, the family invites you to supper. The table is low and wide, the bench is uneven but worn soft with use. A pot of something thick and fragrant bubbles quietly on the hearth. You expect stew, and you're right, but it's what comes with it that truly stays in your memory. A basket is brought out and uncovered with great care, revealing what looks like small cloth sacks, still steaming, nestled against warm stones. You touch one and recoil. It's almost hot. "Stone dumplings," the woman says, grinning. "Not for eating, for warming." Each guest is handed one. You're told to place it in your lap or tuck it under your arms, or even sit on it if your backside's going numb. The sack inside is filled with millet or barley, preheated in a covered skillet earlier in the day. The cloth is thick enough to prevent burns, but thin enough to release heat slowly. "We eat with our hands," the host says, tearing a hunk of oat bread, "so these keep the fingers working." It's a small touch, but deeply effective. Your fingertips stay nimble even as the wind moans against the shutters. After dinner, the children gather around the hearth. One of them retrieves a hollowed-out turnip, waxed and filled with hot coals, suspended on a chain like a lantern. "This is our bedtime firebug," he says proudly. "Goes under the bed for 10 minutes, no more." You peek beneath a bed frame and see metal plates nestled in clay bricks, an early radiant floor heater, powered by whatever scraps of warmth the family could conjure. But what stuns you most is what hangs by the back door. A heavy woolen cloak sewn with pockets of dried beans. Each pocket has been warmed beside the fire. When worn, the beans settle against your chest and spine like tiny embers. The cloak is called a burden coat, not because it's heavy, but because it carries the burden of keeping you alive through the dark. That phrase lingers with you. Later, as you prepare to leave, the woman presses a small bag into your hands. Inside, a flat stone, a pinch of dried thyme, and a scrap of flannel. She says nothing, just pats your arm. On your walk back into the night, you carry the stone close, tucked against your ribs. There's no glow, no visible steam. Just this solid, silent weight of memory and warmth, passed from one pair of hands to another. And you understand now. The weirdest ways of staying warm weren't weird at all. They were stories, inventions, messages whispered across time. Don't give up. There's warmth yet to be found. The sun is barely up when you arrive at your final stop. A craggy village nestled in the mountains, where chimneys puff like old men clearing their throats. The cold here feels different, sharper, the kind that slices through wool and memory alike. You pass a line of houses where animal hides flap across the windows. Not curtains, not insulation. Literal sheep's stomachs, stretched thin and translucent, sealed over the openings like parchment. They let in light but hold back the wind. You run your fingers along one. It crinkles like waxed paper, but warmer. "Poor man's glass," someone mutters nearby. "Warmer than it looks." You nod, pulling your cloak tighter. And yet, despite the bitter air, the villagers don't seem rushed. They move slowly, steadily, as though the cold has been bargained with rather than fought. Inside one home, you find the most startling scene of all. A bed shared not by people, but by goats. Yes, goats. The family sleeps in one corner, the goats in another, divided only by a single board. The warmth radiating from the animals is unmistakable, earthy and constant. One child is curled on the floor nearby, tucked under a blanket made from hair collected off the goats themselves, coarse but effective. "They heat the air better than any stove," the father explains, "and they don't mind our snoring." A wooden shelf above the bed holds jars of dried mustard seeds, which when soaked and wrapped in cloth become primitive hot compresses. One woman wears a sash filled with them around her midsection. Keeps the belly from turning to ice, she says, especially for the older ones. Later you're taken outside to see a trench lined with manure, intentionally placed alongside the outer wall of the house. It's covered with hay and wooden slats. Compost heater, says your host. It cooks slow but long. The wall behind it stays warm all night. You're sceptical, until you place your hand on the stone wall inside and feel it hum, faint but steady. The heat of decay turned into protection from death. In the barn next door, another contraption. A wheelbarrow filled with heated river stones, wheeled around to warm stalls, then rolled into the house at night. Only trick is not to fall asleep in it, a boy jokes, or you'll wake up cooked like a roast. Laughter follows. Even here, where the winters bite hardest, the cold has not stolen joy. That evening the villagers gather in one stone house, small, smoky, packed with bodies. One central fire, not for cooking but for charging rocks, bricks, cloths, even old iron kettles. Everyone lines up to warm their peace. Children carry warmed bones. Elders hold hot bread loaves to their chests long after the crusts are gone. It's communal, rhythmic, ancient. As you sit among them, the fire crackling and the wind howling outside, you notice something beautiful. No one hoards heat here. It's passed, shared, whispered through, hands like a prayer. Tomorrow the wind may howl harder. The compost pit may go cold. The goat may wander. But tonight there is warmth, and it's enough. The fire burns low. The laughter softens. A woman begins to hum, and others join in, their voices barely brushing the air. You lie back against a pile of straw-stuffed cushions, the heat of a stone-warmed skillet beside you, slowly fading but still generous. The smoke curls above, mixing with breath and song, and for a moment time forgets itself. A child wraps herself in a quilt made from patched burlap and old feed sacks, stitched with care and wisdom. Her grandmother tightens a belt around the blanket, not to fasten it, but to trap heat along the spine, an old trick once used by shepherds who slept in fields under the stars. You wonder how many generations have passed this knowledge down, quietly, without ceremony. In the far corner, a young man oils a wooden spoon and tucks it into the back of his shirt, handle pressing gently against his neck. Keeps the draft off the spine, he mutters, as if it were common sense. And here it is. Later, when the hour grows late and the wind starts prowling like an animal outside the door, everyone begins their bedtime rituals. An elder crushes dried nettle leaves into a pouch, slips it under her pillow. For warmth in the blood, she whispers. Another tucks a small baked potato into the foot of her mattress. Not for eating, but to cradle her toes in the first hour of sleep. You're given a spot near the hearth. They pass you a woolen bag filled with warm oats, tied shut and wrapped in linen. It doesn't look like much, but when you hold it to your chest, your whole body exhales. You glance around the room, flickering firelight painting every face in gold. You realize no one here is alone in the cold. Every bed, every blanket, every smoothed stone and warmed brick is part of a pact. We survive together, or not at all. And maybe that's the strangest warmth of all. Not the mustard seeds, not the hot manure trenches, not even the goat's body heat pressed against the wooden slats, but this unspoken understanding that to stay warm in the old world was to be part of one another's fire. You close your eyes, letting the hum of the room fade into a slow heartbeat. Your skin still remembers the firestone, your breath still echoes the mountain air. But now there is only this, soft voices, steady warmth, and a night that asks nothing of you but stillness. The fire has gone quiet now. Its last glow clings to the stones like the final sigh of a long story told. You're tucked beneath layers that smell faintly of smoke, wool, and time. The night has softened. The cold waits respectfully beyond thick walls and thin windows. Let your thoughts settle like embers finding rest. You've wandered through centuries tonight, walked barefoot across stone floors, wrapped yourself in coats of hay and goatskin, cradled hot bricks and slept beside strangers who knew that survival wasn't just about heat, but about memory, tradition, and trust. These weren't just strange inventions, they were quiet acts of care. Each mustard poultice, each steaming bedpan or sheep-fat sock was a message passed down through time. You are not alone in the cold. Someone long ago found a way to stay warm and shared it so you could too. Now, let your breath fall into rhythm with theirs. Inhale the gentle weight of everything that came before you. Exhale the sharp wind outside. Nothing here is urgent. The stones are still warm. The blankets still hold their promise. You are held not just by fabric or fire, but by the thousands of souls who came before you, who lit their hearths and hoped you would one day sleep in peace. So close your eyes. Let the hush of old houses and the memory of glowing embers guide you deeper. You're safe. You're warm. You're home.